All right. Hello, hello. Oh, this is the wrong screen. Let me do my screens here. Hold on. Primary display. What is this? Secondary display? No, not what I want. Jesus. Amateur hour here. All right. New camera overlay. There we go. It's all also I can do my wonderful animated intro that somebody commented that was like somebody's PowerPoint presentation at work or something. Um, I think it's awesome though. Let's see here. Let's get our comments up, and then here we go. All right. People are like, never change. Hello, everyone. R.I.P. Bob Saget. Let's see. Before we start, I wanted to get to one of the questions in the chat was about the anime Vinland Saga, which actually I've been recommended that a couple times by different people, and I do plan on watching it, but I hear a second season is about to be announced, and I'd like to kind of know if a second season is coming before I commit to it. Vinland Saga, by the way, is a Japanese anime taking place at, with Vikings, which kind of interests me in the sense that so in the same way that like Western society orientalizes, the Middle East and Eastern culture and gets everything kind of wrong and funny, the East also occidentalizes like us, and so it's you can get some really funny things that are about how they perceived Western culture and Western history. Though people tell me Vinland Saga is just kind of super violent and fun, but there's some funny stuff. Like there's a few anime that take place in Wisconsin. For some reason, they always choose Wisconsin as the place for their anime to take place because they're like, oh, it's like wildlife in America, and then they'll portray these like massive snow-capped peaks. And it's like, well, you should have chosen Montana or Colorado or something. But they'll choose Wisconsin, like the flattest state in America. It'll have like huge snow-capped peaks, grizzly bears, and stuff like that. But so, oh man. Let's see, Preston. I'm relatively new to your streams. Your full-time gig. Right now, everything in my life is a little in flux right now. I've right now I don't have. I'm kind of on a break from work, and so, but at the same time, I've got a lot of responsibilities right now on the personal front, adjusting to life here in Taipei, which I've followed my wife to Taiwan. So. A lot has to do with we'll see. But I mean, it's tough because people are like, wait, if YouTube's your full-time gig, I expect more content, and it's like, oh my god, like, just let me let me let me let me rest for a second. Yes, this is a Wisconsinite is telling me that they have no peaks. Yes, I actually have a long history with Wisconsin, and I spent a number of years of my youth there. I went to Camp Manitowish. I spent it's funny because there's a lot of things that growing up in a weird friendly state like Wisconsin, and then moving to the East Coast where people are dickheads, and you kind of you understand kind of the different parts of America. Wisconsinites are really nice, but they're really delusional. Like they think that Wisconsin is the perfect place, and there's no reason to leave Wisconsin. And if you say to them like, oh, like, why don't I? What if I want to go to college out of state or something? And they'll be like, well, Madison's a great school. You don't need to leave. and they all believe this in the same way that like Texans believe Texas is the greatest place, even though Texas is a whole. Like New Yorkers believe New York is the greatest place, and you can kind of understand that because it's New York and it's really unique. But Wisconsinites truly believe like Wisconsin is the greatest place on the planet. And and I admit like people are really nice in Wisconsin, but there's no way I would ever like want to live in Wisconsin forever. I mean, it's beautiful and all, but I used to spend all of my my summers in the north of Wisconsin doing all sorts of outdoorsy stuff. I actually did a lot of bow shooting and gun shooting when I was young, which is funny because like today, I would say let's ban all guns. Like I don't care, but like I used to. But that's how I used to spend summer. Wisconsin it's definitely a cult. It's definitely a cult. They'll readily admit that. No Wisconsinite would be like, no. I mean, it's a cult. They have a good sense of humor about it. But it's funny though, having grown up someplace where I used to do a lot of the outdoorsy. Manly stuff like shooting guns, and now how that's all been fetishized. Like I always perceived it like, well, it's like darts, like darts are really fun. Like I like shooting darts at a target, it's a fun pastime. And then all of a sudden it becomes, imagine if people like, just would have massive darts and hang them around each other and like marching through cities and making it part of their identity and trying to trigger the libs by having darts everywhere. It's like, it's just darts. It's just a freaking metal tube that you can propel a small piece of lead at a target with. Like, it's not it's not not something to go crazy for. Now, Texas. Now, I will say there's some appealing things about Texas. I spent some time in San Antonio, and I do like the kind of relaxed feel to San Antonio. Like, I can understand the appeal of wanting to mosey someplace, and it's very relaxed, like high, like you go into every place and every place has a high ceiling, and that's very relaxing, So Texas in many ways is surprisingly relaxing. Because when you meet Texas and they're all like, Texas or die, nah! You think they're all aggro, and it's actually like there's a lot of parts of Texas where it's just I'm gonna have a really slow day, and that's pretty nice, But then there's places like Dallas, and it's just kind of highways that go on for forever, and tornadoes and flatlands, and it's not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. Yeah, but then again, Texas is huge. Like I went to college with my roommate for many years was from El Paso, and it was funny because we had another friend from East Texas, and she's like, Texas pride, and he's like, the distance between me and you is like New York to Chicago. Like, come on. Oh man. I'm gonna visit Thailand in a month. Ever been? Any advice? I've spent about 5 weeks in Thailand, but I spent 5 weeks in Thailand in the year 2000, 2001, early 2001, and it was a beautiful place. It didn't have any American tourists at that time. It was mostly European and tourists, but now the Americans have discovered it. I did the typical kind of things. I went partying on Koh Phangan and went did a lot of diving, and I hung out on Koh Samet. I went to Koh Chang. I went to Koh Phi Phi, where the beach is, the beach. I mean, the advice is just find a beach that you like. Relax. Don't think about it too much. Try not to do too many drugs. There's some crazy stories of just riding a tuk-tuk and meeting a guy who's like, yeah, I'm still looking for my girlfriend. It's been like 3 days. And it's like, what? Like, what? just, just relax. I think they used to put speed in the beer. So I don't know. Just go easy on all of that. You'll have a lot more fun if you relax a bit on that. But do some diving if you can. Like if you can afford diving, do diving. It's one of the most incredible things. Whole different experience in life. I always say that. But you can make excuses and be like, oh, it's expensive. Just do some diving. Learn how to dive. It'll be great. It'll be great. Oh. Um, if the U.S. were to break up the bigger states into smaller states, what do you think? How many do you think there should be in total? That's a weird question. Um, I've never. A lot of people may have these big ideas about the federal government and the local governments and like and which is and federalism and states' rights, and Americans get really uptight about these kinds of issues. But of course, it's only that way when the issue doesn't go their way. So when it's when it's the federal government coming in and saying, no, you guys got to ban slavery. Like people had a big problem with that. But then it was the states leading the way today in things like environmental regulations and same-sex marriage. And so now, so you kind of say, oh, I appreciate, states' rights when the policies go in your way. When the policy's not going your way, you're like, we need the federal government to save us, So I don't know, I think America's kind of broken, obviously, with the Senate and everything and the rural urban divide. I don't know if we could really fix it. I don't think a certain number of states would be right, but it's funny that we're stuck with delineations from many centuries ago, 2 centuries ago, some of these delineations. So it's tough to say. I think it's not that 50 wouldn't be a great number. It's just right now the balance is all screwed up. So I'm like, oh yeah, no, I definitely think DC deserves representation. Like that's just a given. But if we broke up, if you tried to adjust things so that everybody had a certain amount of urban and a certain amount of rural in that area, but you'd have to do an entire new shuffle. I don't know. I don't know if it's about break. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with big states. It's just everything's allocated weird in America for misrepresentation. There's not equal representation in America. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Let's go here. Favorite ASoC character. I do like Zorro. I think he's an interesting character. Missandei, we don't know anything about yet. Like the show kind of biases us. Like if Missandei were just by herself and we didn't think about anything else, how much would we think about Missandei? She's sort of this mystery character. Like what could she be? Is she actually an agent of the House of Black and White? Like, I don't know. A lot of its potential. Like, does Penny have potential? When I think of like who has the most depth I actually really like Hisdar as a character. I really like Hisdar. I liked Yezin as a character. I liked Zorro. I like characters with many sides to them. I'm trying to think of any others that really stick out, because we never really got to know any of the Dothraki personalities. which is too bad, considering that they've been traveling with Daenerys forever, and we don't know anything about Irri and Jiqui. Like nothing about their personalities at all. We know nothing about the Blood Riders. We know nothing. They're pretty faceless, you know? The fact that we know a lot more about a random guy in Karth than we do about, you know, Ricaro or Jago, Irri, Jiqui, any of these people. Yeah, that's a funny thing to think about, actually. We know more about the Widow of the Waterfront and her personality than Irri and Jiqui. That's just it's too bad. That's too bad. All right, let's see here. Um, What? Not all black people are that way. What are we talking about? Everybody's different. I don't understand. Maybe there's a previous chat that I didn't see there. Drogo is the one you're missing. Drogo is interesting. I mean, he did have some depth compared to the rest of the. We didn't get too much of him, but he has certainly more depth than any other Dothraki that we've been shown. Jason Momoa added so much to the character that wasn't necessarily in the book. He's, I think you could not have chosen a better actor to be Khal Drogo and make the character more than he was. I think George R. R. Martin was definitely trying to have somebody super likable come across. Like when you hear that, when you see the first descriptions of Khal Drogo, it's like, oh, he's huge, but he moves like a panther. He definitely wanted Drogo to be cool and deserving of being a king. And the fact that he he has an open mind and he listens to Dany, and is not actually rigid in his thinking. And he wasn't given that much time before he was eventually killed off. But I think Jason Momoa, considering he hardly speaks any English at all in his whole perception, in his whole portrayal, is able to come across as this super likable guy. And somebody where you can kind of say, oh yeah, I see it all in his face. Let's see here. What's this one? Given the recent acknowledgement by the United States government, I wonder if you have any thoughts on the UAP phenomenon? What's that about? What is UAP phenomenon? Oh. Essentially, these are UAPs or UFOs. So if I believe that the government is hiding aliens or knowledge of aliens, no, I do not. I do not think aliens have visited the Earth. I do not think the U.S. government is hiding any sort of knowledge based on that. Anything where you're going to have some sort of cover up would probably be some sort of weapons testing or something would be my guess. But you can just look at little things like, okay, in all of the time of Earth, and it's billions of years, and let's say we establish that another civilization is out there, why would they only be visiting us now in the past 60 years of our entire existence? And when you have like other organizations out there listening for radio waves, and other forms of communication in space, would you come up with nothing? Also, the government, it's really bad at keeping secrets. Like there's just leaks constantly. There's leaks constantly with everything over the most irrelevant things. There's no way that I would think that you could keep UFOs a secret. So it, I just don't think that I don't think that there's any possibility that the U.S. is hiding aliens or anything like that, or unidentified, extraterrestrial UFOs. If there was some UFO that people were worried about, and the U.S. government like kept it a secret, it probably was some Air Force test flight of something or another, and I'm just guessing on that. But there's no way in my mind. If aliens were visiting Earth, they would have visited. They had a lot of time to visit. I mean, are we assuming that there's some sort of like first contact situation, like they're waiting for us to split the atom, and then they go, okay, now we can come in and visit them? I don't know if they're into interstellar travel, between across hundreds of light years or whatever, thousands of light years, millions of light years. They must think that we are just the equivalent of an amoeba. Like, it just doesn't. I don't know. Do you think George R. R. Martin would trust another author to finish A Song of Ice and Fire? If he can't. Well, first of all, he can't. Let's settle that right there. He can't. Okay, he's not going to finish Ice and Fire. Okay, we're hoping that he's going to finish Winds of Winter. We're really hoping, but would he trust another author? I don't know. So the big example that we have before was obviously Robert Jordan, and Robert Jordan was also really against anyone finishing Wheel of Time. And only at the very end, when he was like sick, did he kind of change his mind and give everything to his wife. And his wife kind of made the decision. She's the one that went out, and it's funny because she was actually only considering 2 people to finish. George R. R. Martin was one of them, and Brandon Sanderson was the other. And it was just, I just think of this like alternate universe where George R. R. Martin was chosen, and it's just like, okay, I guess nothing's getting finished. Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones isn't getting finished. So, but could he change his mind? Maybe. The thing is also, he leaves everything to his wife. Could his wife change her mind? That's the more important question. Could Paris change her mind? I mean, it's all Paris's decision. Once George R. R. Martin's dead, it's like, whatever. So, I mean, granted, people don't usually immediately change. Like, if George R. R. Martin is dead set that no one is going to finish his stuff, I don't think that Paris would choose anybody anytime soon, unless it was, because her mind, it would take a long time for her mind to be changed. Like, but I don't know. I've got my own ideas. Speaking of, by the way, I'm gonna do something real quick. Hold on a second. I'll get to this question in a second. I want to show something. I'm going to make all of you face your mortality a little. Okay. So, okay. All right, everyone. This is an actuary table from Social Security Administration. They spend a lot of time thinking about death and how long we live and things like this. And so we got to start, when you're young, the probability of you dying in that year, this is your death probability, is pretty low. Okay. As you get older, obviously your chance of dying in that year starts increasing. Now, if you notice, all the way up until 50 or whatever, your chances of dying are really low. Like even at 50, your chance of dying in a current year, 0.3%. Okay, that's pretty good, you know? Then things start climbing quite a bit. By the way, the 50s, the number one cause of death in America is heart attacks and heart disease. Cancer, heart attacks, heart disease. But these things are likely going to hit you in your 50s. So if you can get through your 50s, you know, your average life expectancy jumps to, once you hit 60, your average life expectancy is like 86 for a man or something. So you can actually see it here. Here, 84.8. So if you make it to 60, you're expected to live to 84 and a half if you're, you know, so you've got, once you make it through your 50s, it's kind of a dangerous time. So then we get to Bob Saget. Bob Saget died at 65. 65-year-olds only have a 1% chance of making it through, of dying in their given year. I mean, 1% is not nothing, but you know, now let's get up to George R. Martin. He's 73. You know, not so bad. 2% chance of dying in a given year. You know, it's not so bad. But once you get up into your 80s, you know, you got a 4%, 5% chance of dying every year. And then once you're in your 90s, it's like a good 10, 15% chance of dying every year. So I mean, granted, George R. Martin, I mean, just saying, based on the tables, 2% chance this year. You know, just something to think about, everybody. You know, you're not mortal. But so could fake Arya end up Queen of the North instead of Sansa like in the show? Maybe it's why D&D put Sansa instead. Ironic ending for Gene Pool. That's a I mean, that'd be a nice ending for someone like Jane Poole. But let's see. Let's try to figure out what might happen to her. So she's currently with Justin Massey, on her way to the Wall, and so she's got about a 3-week trip there. At the Wall, there's chaos, people fighting, and then you know, either Ramsay or Bruce or Stannis would win down south. We have some sort of, are we expecting Jon to come back and have some sort of big battle? What would Jon do with a Jane Poole that he knows is not the queen? Would he announce it? Would he give it up? That's a I mean, I couldn't imagine a big great council at the end where Jane Poole is allowed the North by Bran, or other people that could recognize her. You know, given that, I'm trying to think of all the people that can actually recognize Sansa. There's all the prisoners at the Dreadfort that can recognize her, and there still are prisoners at the Dreadfort. Bran, Arya, Jon. Oh, the Lannisters, Tyrion, Jaime, Queen, they've all met her. They know what she looks like. Though Jaime did immediately know it wasn't her. I mean, it would be a nice ending for her, I guess. You know, we all kind of want something for Jane Poole, but plus she's lost a bit of her nose, so now she's even more unrecognizable. Like, of course, could Sansa just come out of hiding and be recognized as the real one? Yes, but she also has an interesting path if she remains as Elaine Stone and she gets legitimized and she becomes the head of Harrenhal, because she is the heir to Harrenhal if she's legitimized and Littlefinger dies. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, I would, if I were writing the book, maybe I'd put something like that for Jane Poole in the end. Just have the fake remain as the real. I don't think, I don't know if George R. R. Martin would do it, but it would be a fun ending. Actually, I would love something like that. I would love it if actually like all the main characters actually died and their fakes took over, just continued on. Euron is Earthon Nightwalker. Probably, I'm guessing. I think this theory fits pretty well. We know that Euron was outside of Karth to pick up the warlocks, and we know that he was around Slaver's Bay to see Dany take over. So he was in that. He was, if we follow his path backwards in time, it does lead to Karth. And him having a glass candle and knowing a lot of things could help explain why he's so knowledgeable on everything. So, and Urathon is a historical Iron Island's name. So I think it's a pretty good theory that Urathon Nightwalker was Euron. Plus, it sounds like Euron. I don't know. I mean, there's no reason this couldn't be. I don't think it's necessarily ever going to be addressed. I mean, granted, we might not get another book, so maybe it will never be addressed. But it's one of those little things is that that it's completely feasible, completely and utterly feasible. I think all the evidence makes sense. There's nothing to possibly undo it. So, with regards to that, man, I mean, it would have been a fun theory. Euron equals Dario. I love the idea, especially with the timing, because the fascinating thing about A Storm of Swords is that the Dany story is not happening when the rest of the stories in the book take place. Like we know that the Dany story takes place over the course of only a few weeks. She just she just makes a run. It's Astapor, it's Yunkai, it's Meereen, and it's boom, boom, boom over the course of her story takes place in maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but it's spread out over the course of all of A Storm of Swords, which takes place over maybe about 4 months, I think, is the time period of the Storm of Swords. So the you could conceive prior to the Forsaken chapter, you could make the argument that he appeared as Dario, he went all the way back, he went all the way again because Dario disappears for a while in A Dance with Dragons, kind of between books, so Dance with Dragons, Storm of Swords. One could make the argument, but Forsaken happened. We know exactly where he is. He's with Aeron the entire time. We have a first-person perspective on that. It's too bad. It's really interesting. It was a great theory. Would have made the books better, in my opinion, but too bad. Yeah, you said that your endgame theory for Song of Ice and Fire shifted from Children of the Forest Revenge to Save the World time-traveling brand ending. Could these theories still be compatible? Yeah, I do think they're somewhat compatible. I mean, I think that it's quite possible that the Children of the Forest were trying to cause mankind to kill itself, and then with the help of a placeholder three-eyed crow, and that the three-eyed crow started a cycle of time travel in order to save the world, and that Bran is eventually chosen as the time travel person. I'm not sure if there's other time travelers before Bran, but it could be that it was all set up, and then Bran kind of realizes everything at the last minute, and he happens to have time travel abilities, and he goes back to try to stop everything. So they're not mutually exclusive. You're right that you could have a situation where the children of the forest were trying to cause mankind to kill themselves. Time traveling Bran realizes it at the last minute, and then goes back in time to try to stop everything, somehow. But but I think when I said I like shifted, it was about every single prophecy being a Children of the Forest plant. Was the idea, was what I kind of had the first opinion of, that all prophecy is bullshit. Is this getting bright? What is this doing? There we go. Come on. Is it reflecting? No, it's still back. Bastard. Okay. That all prophecy was bullshit, and the Children of the Forest were responsible. To some of the prophecy is actually true because it comes from an alternate timeline, not necessarily like an alternate timeline, like two timelines are existing, but a previous iteration of time. That this is time traveling Bran has played the chess game before. I've been working on Time Traveling Bran Part 4. It's certainly mind twisting. I don't know how well it's coming out. We'll see. You guys can judge when it comes out. Hey Preston, did you hear Bob Saget died? No drugs were found. I wonder what killed him. It's a good question. Sweet sleep would have been found in his system, right? Let's see. I mean, no foul play either. I mean, what's usually the case is they find a belt or something, self-asphyxiation or something crazy like that. But I don't know, maybe just died of a heart attack. I don't want to say anything bad about Bob Saget, though. One of my favorite jokes of all time is Gilbert Gottfried did this thing where he went during some roast, and he goes up there and he's like, look, I know there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of ideas about Bob Saget killing a woman in 1989, raping and murdering a woman in 1989, but there's no truth to the idea that Bob Saget raped and murdered a woman in 1989. I know that some people think that he raped and murdered a woman in 1989, but there is no truth to the fact. And then he just keeps repeating it over and over again, which is, this political, it's such a political scheme, right? To just throw accusations and so many accusations at somebody until they start, even though you're saying, oh, there's no truth to it, the fact that an accusation exists is so damning. Reread Game of Thrones. Felt like real dragons were a late retcon. Harrenhal not said to be burned. Aegon came on ships. Blood of the dragon. Sounds like lies. Huh. That's interesting. George R. R. Martin did say that he originally, and this is actually in his dedication to Phyllis Eisenstein, that originally he didn't want dragons in the story at all, and that Phyllis Eisenstein convinced him to change his mind, that he wanted a more grounded, non-magical story. But then again, Blood of the Dragon is written fairly early, and it of course does have a dragon. It does have the dragon's hatch at the very end. So it's certainly possible. But that some of that old text is still in there, that he had written a whole bunch before the dragons were thought about. So it depends the definition of late. Like, he admits that there was a change. Like, his idea of everything was that there was not going to be dragons, and then Phyllis Eisenstein convinced him otherwise. But then it has to be before he wrote Blood of the Dragon, which definitely has dragons in it. trying to think of like timeline wise, because he wrote that first Bran chapter back in like 1992, he says. And then obviously Blood of the Dragon was probably finished in early 96. And then, so, you know, there's definitely time. I don't know how much he had written here and there. Da, da, da. Please read Berserk. I don't know. It's not finished. It's never going to be finished. You know, when I got into Ice and Fire, I thought it was going to be finished. Carmine can post of whether or not Berserk is still worth it, knowing that it's never going to be finished. I'm waiting for your comment, Carmine, because I'm going to be paying attention. Yeah, this is the thing about he did talk about this in that clip with the that gamer fantasy YouTube channel I forgot the name of, but where he was talking about whether or not they were just going to have pyrokinesis or something, or be pyromancers rather than actually being able to ride dragons. would have been interesting. I mean, I'm in Wheel of Time, and there's no. They talk about the Dragon Reborn. I don't see any dragons. Maybe they're gonna appear later. I don't know. I haven't read Wheel of Time, but there's no Doesn't seem like there's any dragons in Wheel of Time. Carmine says it's worth it. He says it's worth it. How many volumes of Berserk? What? Oh gosh. All right. Let's look this up. Let's look up how much Berserk. 41 volumes? You want me to read 41 volumes of manga? Going from 1990 all the way to 2021? 31 years? 364 issues? Oh my God. Oh my God. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? It's all... I mean, is there a book that has them all compiled? Do I have to buy 41 volumes of 42 volumes? How many roads must a man walk down? What's my take on Rickon's future? Well, the interesting thing is whether or not Rickon's already been saved from Skagos. Like we cut out on Davos's story fairly early in A Dance with Dragons, so he has oodles of time to go get Rickon and come back. So we might only know about Rickon's story on Skagos in retrospect, in flashback. And I say this as, I'm a broken record on this, but when Mors Umber quizzes Jane Poole on Winterfell, he asks her questions that relate a lot to Osha. He asks her about the cook who Osha was sleeping with, and he asks her about Mikken, who, she was carrying a sword with Mikken's mark. And so it's interesting stuff, because Mors Umber, when he asks these questions, why would Mors Umber know about the name of Gage the cook or Mikken the smith? He wouldn't know those things. In fact, he even lies. He says, "Oh, I had this great meat pie during the winter festival." No, that was not the flavor of the pie. I think it was a chicken or something. Something like the pies don't match up. Now, granted, George R. R. Martin occasionally messes things up, but it's so it seems like he at least has Osha in his possession, which kind of sounds like he would have Rickon too, and Davos, meaning if they've brought Rickon back, that means the Manderleys are on board, And we kind of know that the Manderleys and Umbers are working together because they were ordered to build ships together back in A Clash of Kings. So you kind of have the Umber Manderley alliance, and so they would be on board with Stannis at this point. So but would he just be a puppet? Is he actually developing his warging abilities and things like that? I don't know. I mean, the fact that in the show he's just killed off makes me think that he might be killed off. There are aspects of the book that make me think that the ending is going to be that the events are going to unfold a little bit like the show, and that's Stannis has the hubris of questioning whether or not Ramsay should be respected. Theon says, "Oh, you should be scared of Ramsay," and Stannis is like, "Why? What battles has he won?" Like that kind of hubris is the kind of thing that gets characters killed. In real life, that kind of hubris doesn't do anything. But in books and stories, that kind of hubris gets people killed. So you kind of, you think, okay, maybe Stannis is going to win his first kind of battles against Roose, but eventually Ramsay is gonna beat Stannis. That's a fear. That eventually Ramsay's going to come up on top and kill Rickon like he does in the book. It's a sad thing because I think Rickon has a lot of potential, especially if in a sort of who's the character that Neville from Harry Potter, where there's my wife I never read Harry Potter, but my wife tells me that there's this running joke for many years that Neville, some character named Neville, actually like fit all of the prophecy bits as much as Harry Potter, and so there's a fan theory that he was the chosen one and not Harry Potter, which would have been pretty great. 361 issues of pure awesome. Read the 42 picture books to Preston Jr. I mean, so reading to a toddler is kind of it's a very funny, somewhat exhausting thing. But like you're reading, and it's not like he's just like listening to the story. He wants to know like the emotions of each person and like make sense of them all. So he will like point to a person and he'll be like, he happy. He's scared. And you're like, okay, yeah, no, and okay, yeah, no, he looks pretty scared. Yeah, he's a little worried. He's worried that he's not gonna be able to get that strawberry. He's scared. Yeah, no, he's worried about that strawberry. He's scared. And you're like, okay, yeah, all right. He not scared. He happy. And you're like stuck. Okay, let's move on with the story. And then he like pulls the page back. He not scared. Like, oh God, can you imagine like reading 341 issues of Berserk and him being like, he happy. He not happy. He's stabbed by sword. He hurt. Oh God. Did Sansa talk to Dantos in front of a heart tree, knowing or thinking Northmen can't lie in front of a heart tree? If so, why? So the tree that in the Godswood at King's Landing is a like center tree to pray, but it's not a werewood. And so I think that might make a difference. I mean, granted that someone like Bran can probably see out of everything eventually, that he can move beyond the trees and not even need the trees to see the world. But it's in a strict religious sense that a Northman shouldn't lie in front of a heart tree. I mean, I think that's specifically a werewood, and that you'd actually be in front of one of the gods. And so the tree in that Godswood wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if it would have the same sort of bond. Plus, like, Dantos is not a Northman. He wouldn't know about these sorts of things. And so I don't know. I'd have to go back to think about that, the significance of that scene again, because yes, they're in the Godswood, and they could perhaps be heard by someone that could communicate through that, but they're not actually in front of a werewood, which has different both science fictiony, fantastical, supernatural kind of implications, and the fact that um, it's not of religious significance. I also don't even know if Sansa's that familiar with the religious taboo of the religion of the old gods. Like they kind of talk about these sorts of things like here and there in passing, like Jon Snow to Jeor Mormont and stuff. But is Sansa aware of it? I mean, it's an odd thing about the children's religion, because we don't really hear about the daughters having an education in the religion of the old gods, and we only very in a minor sense hear about Robb and Jon like taking on that religion. Like we know that a sept was built, and obviously like Sansa and Arya have a septa who's going to teach them about the faith, but the boys don't have a septon necessarily like teaching them, or at least they don't talk about him. I mean, there's definitely a septon. There's Septon Shale, who like exists in Winterfell, but the boys don't talk about Septon Shale as a figure in their life like they do about Old Nan or Maester Luwin, as part of the inner circle. So I wonder if the boys are being taught the religion of the old gods, and the girls are being taught the new gods. It's a weird background. I don't even know if George R. R. Martin like thought about this correctly. You know, when he wrote this sort of stuff and popped it into a Game of Thrones, because it's really significant that Catelyn Stark is the first person to build a sept in Winterfell. Like after all thousands of years, like with intermarriage, and she's the first one. Like that's crazy, because she's not the first person that worships the faith of the Seven to be Lady of Winterfell. We know about Royce from the She Wolves of Winterfell, that she's definitely going to be a follower of the faith of the faith of the Seven. So it's really I don't know if George really got the religion all worked out or thought about. It's just really significant that Catelyn is the first person to build a sept, and no one mentions it. Like, this is not a huge deal. Like, they aren't burning down these septs or getting angry, or they'll be like, "Oh, that bitch wife of Lord Eddard bringing up those foreign gods." Like, none of that. Like, you would think it's a big deal, because building a sept was a big deal on the Iron Islands, and then they burned it down the minute they could. It's Black Tide being a follower of the faith of the Seven is a big deal. So, and it's because we meet these Northerners later on, and they're religious zealots too. So why wouldn't they be angry about the Lady of Winterfell bringing the faith of the Seven up, and then teaching their daughters about the faith of the Seven and things like that? I don't know. I don't think it was on, but to answer the question, I don't think it was on Sansa's mind. Now, was George making some sort of literary parallel about Dantos and her being in front of the heart tree, and whether their secrets are being kept or not? I think he's probably making some idea that this is not something that's actually happening in secret. But of course, they needed a reason for Sansa to be able to go out and meet in secret with Dantos that didn't raise suspicion. So her going out and praying was this like cover story. Of course, she wasn't actually necessarily praying. She was like talking to Dantos, right? So they kind of needed a cover story anyway. But I mean, I guess it's I mean, it's probably just more of a statement about people using these um, religion and faith as a cover for various stuff. But it's interesting. I have to go back and read that scene again and to see what it parallels to. But certainly, Sansa probably wasn't aware of anything, and Dantos isn't a Northerner, so he's not bound to that, and it's not even a werewood. So I don't know. I don't know. Okay, that was a long explanation. Harry Potter's better than Berserk. Maybe. I have no idea. Um, Everyone in Berserk is scared all of the time. That man's scared. That man's scared. That man not scared. That man not scared. Um, if they sacrifice and fire for kids, it's kind of funny even to have the you. I imagine you guys have all seen the Sesame Street Game of Thrones or Game of Chairs where they play musical chairs. Obviously it's like Sesame Street has a lot of like tongue in cheek winks at the parents that kids are never going to get. But if you guys have never seen the Sesame Street Game of Chairs skit, it's pretty funny. Um, but Grover is dressed as uh, the Shireen's fool. Um, the and they decide to play Patch Face, and they decide to play musical chairs, and it's like Joffrey, Cersei, Ned um, are playing, and he makes various jokes. Like Joffrey loses, and he's like, "Oh, way to choke, Joffrey," or and then Ned loses, and he's like, "Oh, don't lose your head," some funny stuff. Um, Quaithe is my favorite. Zaro isn't shit. Barristan is blood, and Missandei love. Barristan's funny in the sense that he's such an idiot. I love how stupid he is. He does like he just gets totally tricked by Skahas and just manipulated. I mean, you gotta you obviously like him because he's honorable and he's caring about these boys that he's training and everything. And um, but man, he's essentially Ned reborn in how much he's bowled over by a Littlefinger. Uh, uh, uh. Um, the three introduce themselves in the same order as the betrayals: Pyatt, Zaro, Quaithe. Quaithe spoke to them, saying they came seeking dragons. Um, Three betrayals you will have. One for let's pull up the quote. Let's pull up the quote here. So what they're talking about is when Dany arrives in Karth, she's greeted by Pyatt Pri, Zaro, Zoandaxis, and Quaithe. And Pyatt speaks to her in Dothraki, Zaro in High Valyrian, and Quaithe in the Common Tongue. And then we kind of like, it's the end of the chapter, so we don't really get to know what actually Dany said to any of them at the time, which is too bad. You kind of just, you kind of get more later on what Zaro wants because he wants to marry her, and it's pretty. But what exactly, Pyatt Pri hoped to do, or what he said to her. Let's see here. Let's find out. Okay. Let's I'll put this put this here for a second. All right, let's go to so here we are. 3 heads of the dragon, mother of dragon, child of storm. 3 fires you must light, 1 for life, 1 for death, 1 to love. Her own heart was being in unison. 3 mounts your ride, 1 to bed, 1 to dread, 1 to love. 3 treasons you'll know. 1 for blood, once for blood, once for gold, once for love. I don't know if that necessarily fits. Let's see. I mean, Pyatt, I guess maybe that's for... I guess Pyatt is angry about her blood and whether or not, they want to steal her dragons and have... I mean, they all want her dragons, right? So that's true. The question is, yeah, Quaithe. How much does Quaithe want to steal Dany's dragons as well? Yeah, Pyatt. Okay, Pyatt Pre wants to absorb Dany into their collective consciousness of the House of the Undying, in the same way as to parallel Bran being absorbed into the weirwood net on the other side of the world, and so I guess he's liking her blood in the same way that the weirwood net is looking for a green seer and they like Bran because of his blood. Okay, I'm on board with the first one. That once for blood. Okay. And then once for gold. Is Zaro interested in the dragons to sell or things like that? I don't know. I mean, maybe we aren't really sure because he definitely wants those dragons, and he wants to marry in. Or no, I guess he's trying to trade that fleet for 1 dragon. But would it be a resell, or does he want power? Maybe. Who knows? And then once for love. Well, unfortunately, we know nothing about Quaithe, so it could be. Well, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It could work. But with that, the unfortunate thing is with the House of the Undying and those prophecies is just everything fits. So it's pretty tough. Okay. Top 3 best kings and top 3 worst kings of Westeros. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to present story or historical, but we got a lot of kings. Okay, so and if we're defining king as doing what's good for their people and things like that, as opposed to just, doing something awesome. So, let me think. So Mance Rayder, say what you like about him. He's the only one that really cares about all of his people. He's the only one that's really trying to save everyone, every one of his subjects, down to the average Joe. Everybody else doesn't necessarily care about that sort of stuff. I think Daenerys does. She cares about the common slave. But Mance Rayder is one of the only ones that really, really cares. And it's impressive that he comes with almost nothing. He unites nearly everyone and gets them down to the wall. And they were eventually going to make it. They were eventually going to win. If it weren't for just Stannis coming in out of nowhere and that was pretty unlucky. How is he supposed to know that someone, you know, um, all of a sudden wants to come north? And had he got his people through, you know, he would have saved a lot of them. He really tried. He really cared. And he seems to still be scheming. And he still think he might be successful in saving a lot of his people. A lot of his people died. It's true. But if I'm really talking about somebody caring about his subjects and doing what's best for them, Mance Rayder, I think, is probably going to be your best king. Trying to think who else we got. I guess Daenerys is also trying to save people, frees the slaves. So at this point in our story, I understand that later on, who knows what's going to happen. But at this point in our story, Daenerys has freed thousands and thousands of slaves and has helped people. Yeah, she did some jerky things. At Astapor, she killed people that were as young as 12. I granted, she killed the masters and things like this. But she's helped a lot more people than she's hurt at this point. So I will grant that, like, at this point in our story, Daenerys is pretty good. And then I'm trying to think anybody else who's any good. I would say that Tommen, just because he's got really poor, there's just no one else around. But I would say that Tommen and his administration, and I'm talking about the very brief Kevin Lannister administration of trying to create peace and bring things together. Maybe I'm going to say that Tommen's administration is the third, only because everybody else sucks. Everybody else is horrible. Tommen's the only one I can think of. I mean, okay, Robert wasn't bad, actually. No, actually, I have to say Robert's going to be a better king than because he's actually responsible for stuff personally. So I think Robert did okay. So the three worst kings, you've got to say that Balon is just a dreadful idiot. His attack on the north and what he got the Iron Islands into was just horrible, and it can only be matched in its stupidity by Euron. So I would say that Balon and Euron are the top two worst kings in Westeros. They just bring nothing but destruction and death to their entire civilization, who they they're supposed to care about. And then after that, I'm trying to think if I would give the next worst king to somebody like Khal Drogo's not bad. I'm trying to think of the Khals. The Khals, not so bad if they're talking about caring about their own people. I mean, if they're talking about being horrible to other people, that's one thing. But caring about their own people, Stannis didn't really do anything for anybody except to create war. Renly didn't have the chance to do anything for anybody. Robb didn't really get a chance. They're all pretty bad. I'd say the one that's done the most damage is probably Robb. Just because it's... yeah. I mean, nearly everybody in the North just has gotten killed because of Robb's decisions. And so based on like a personal vendetta, it was a stupid move. It was a stupid move trying to declare independence for both the North and the Riverlands. The Riverlands is not defendable. He just got a lot of people suffered because of Robb. So I'm going to say Robb, Euron, and Balon are the worst kings, while Mance, Daenerys, and Robert are our best kings. Okay. Um, did the Vale Mountain clans abandon the old gods and create their own religion? They're the first men, but they don't share the same beliefs as Northerners. Um, this is an interesting question. People ask me a lot if, like, for some reason, there's this belief that somehow people in the Royces or something are still worshiping the old gods, which is just not the case. There's no one in the Vale that worships the old gods. There's no one left. Now there were some odd cults among the Vale clans where they worshipped things like dragons and stuff like that. Um, so I don't think that they worshipped the old gods very much in the Vale because the werewoods wouldn't grow in the rocky soil. So if you go maybe lower down on the mountains, you're going to have some beliefs in the old gods that maybe would stick around longer. But the Andals first invaded the Vale, and so if any place, and that's when the Andals were the most religious extremist and crazy. So if you're talking about like when people got slaughtered, I imagine that most of the old gods worshippers got slaughtered by the Vale clans, and they didn't have heart trees and things like that to ground their religion as much. I mean, maybe down the mountain some, but you do hear about these weird cults that the Vale Mountain clans have. But they should, you know, there wasn't an active, civilizing of them. So one would think that some of them would still have some connections to the old gods, but not everything really makes sense when you look at the history. So, I'm gonna take a real quick look at the. Um, yeah. So the clans kind of the way they resisted the Andals would be to run up into the mountains. And so I imagine that up in those mountains you aren't able to get any weirwoods to grow. So my guess would be something like that um, happened, that their religion evolved over time away from the old gods into some sort of weird cults. But you'd think at least one clan would still worship the old gods or something, But I don't know. We don't hear about it. Or if we do, like, I'm not aware of it. It's kind of funny. Damn, damn, damn. Um, I'm way, way behind on what's this? Danny's story is so weird right now. Why is she back east? I also think the blood of her legs was a miscarriage, not a period. I don't know if that's significant. Um, yeah, George R. R. Martin is really, really weird about Danny's vaginal blood. Danny's vaginal blood makes a lot of appearances throughout the entire story, and it's odd. It's odd because she has all these dreams about vaginal blood, and then and then she later has a miscarriage, and right around the time, well, she not a miscarriage, but supposedly she has a stillbirth, and right around that time we have the hatching of the dragon eggs. So there are some theories that perhaps there was something hormonal going on with her miscarriage that actually caused the dragons to hatch, or her stillbirth that caused the dragons to hatch, or something. There's or maybe miscarriages or something around that could affect things. But there is some ideas that she didn't even think she was fertile, right? But she was eating weird berries and everything, and then got her miscarriage. And then some people wonder if it's like, oh, it's a period, meaning all of a sudden she's fertile again, after all this time of not being fertile after her miscarriage. So it's a long time, and what would induce it suddenly? I don't know. When people bring up magic and weird telepathic visitors and stuff like that, it's hard to say. But why is she back east? I think there's, in a structural sense, George R. R. Martin likes to subvert expectations, and he kind of says, okay, you think that she's going to head to Westeros? Well, boom, she heads the other direction. Just like you think Theon's going to join the Night's Watch, well, boom, he's doing something completely different. So I think George R. R. Martin's just doing something like that. So she did receive a vision in the House of the Undying about being in front of the mountains of the being at Vastoth Rock. And this is significant because it's so you let's see here. Let me bring up the quote because this kind of directs Dany's whole story. All right, here we go. All right, let's shrink me. Okay, so faster and faster the visions came one after the other until it seemed the very air had come alive. Shadows swirled and danced inside the tent, boneless and terrible. So we kind of know that this is her stillbirth kind of situation. Little girl ran barefoot towards the house with the red door. Obviously, house with the red door, her running barefoot. Doesn't sound like Bravos. Miramine's door shrieked in flames, dragon bursting from her brow. Yeah. Behind the silver corpse, bloody corpse of a naked man. That's the wine cellar. People talk about this. A white lion ran through the grass, taller than a man. Who could this be? We don't know. Could be a lot of different people. Is it Tyrion? Is it Jaime? Who knows? We don't have an explanation on what this white lion is. And then beneath the Mother of Mountains, a line of naked crones crept from a great lake and knelt shivering before her, their gray heads bowed. So, Mother of Mountains is in Vastoth Rock. And so we know she has to go back to Vastoth Rock. And we know that the crones are probably the Dosh Khaleen. And they're bowing to her, which in a Game of Thrones, it was revealed that the real power, according to Dany's perspective, the real power of the Dothraki lay within the Dosh Khaleen. And in the show, this is turned on its head, and we go and we find these women, and no, they don't have any power at all. But at least here in the show, in her visions, she's getting they're bowing her, like the powers of Vastoth Rock are bowing to her, meaning she's has complete rule over the Dothraki, which is what we see come out in the show, right? She goes into Vastoth Rock and ends up ruling completely all of the Dothraki. So that's likely what she's doing out east, is she's doing what she did in the show, what she did in her vision. She's going back to claim all of the Dothraki, to get an even bigger army than she has. Whether she's going to keep going back to Karth and talk to Quaithe again or things like that, we don't know. I don't know why George R. R. Martin brought Zoe and Daxus back. for Dance with Dragons. If we're talking about the most useless chapter of A Dance with Dragons, it's probably Daenerys 3, where Zaro comes. Like nothing significant happens in that. The Carthene Camel Corps and the Carthene blockade are really minor plot points of A Dance with Dragons. Not really necessary, but for some reason they brought Zaro back just for that. But maybe she'll go back to Karth and something will happen there. I know that A Song of Ice and Fire has very, very little on Slaver's Bay and Karth. So it seems like George R. R. Martin is keeping that in case he writes about it. So she might go back to Karth after Vastoth Rock. If she has a dragon, she can fly pretty quickly. And then real quick, 10,000 slaves lifted their blood-stained hands and raced by her, crying, "Mother, mother, mother." This happens twice. This happens after her liberation of Yunkai, but it also happens when she's dealing with the refugees outside of Astapor. So they yell the same kind of thing. Reaching, touching her cloak, hems. They needed her life. Blah blah blah. And then it's really they're trying to absorb her into the collective consciousness of the. Where in Dorne was the Red Door? I don't think the Red Door is in Dorne, personally, just because it's not. Viserys didn't feel like he was home, and Dorne is part of the Seven Kingdoms. So, I have a very kind of boring explanation on where I think the House with the Red Door is, but the southern flatlands north of Myr, I think is my explanation. It's not. The White Lion means that Tyrion is like no others Lannisters because he's a Targaryen. So there's of course the old Tyrion Targaryen theory. This idea that because Aerys was making kind of inappropriate advances towards Tywin's wife, Johanna Lannister, that perhaps he actually did sleep with her or rape her and produce Tyrion. I think there might be something. No, it's not. There's nothing in there. There was a question of whether something in A World of Ice and Fire went against this. There's something about if there was a small theory of him being the father of Jaime and Cersei, but that can't happen because of something in A World of Ice and Fire. But does he have time? Does he have time to? Yeah, it's possible. But and I think I wrote about once this weird issue of Tyrion's eyes being two different colors, and like I won't say that this because George R. R. Martin, he gardens, right? He does a whole bunch of stuff, and then some of them come true, and then everyone goes, "Oh, he foreshadowed it." Well, he didn't foreshadow all the other crap, so it's kind of like Rasputin prophecy. If you make enough prophecies, eventually a few of them are going to come true. There is something called chimera, where you can have two sets of DNA. This is, let's see here, come on. Let's see if I can get this up here. Is this not? I'm trying to add. Oh, that's not the right file type. Let's see if I can get this. I wanted a picture of a real chimera, and the ones I'm finding are not the right file type for me to just drag it on. But some people bring it up with cats. But the idea is that like there are some cats where, and then it happens to people. Or like this rat picture is pretty good if I can get this one. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. So you can actually have like in the kind of zygote embryonic development, you can have two different cell groupings with two different DNAs. Two different fertilized eggs actually fuse into one individual. And so chimeras are real individuals that have two different sets of DNA, because different chunks of their body are actually originating from different organisms, and then were fused together. So like you can literally have your arm be a different DNA as your other arm. You're fused twins in a sense. And so this idea that perhaps, Tyrion is some sort of like fused twin where his Tywin had sex with Joanna Lannister and Aerys had sex with Joanna Lannister at the same time. And then they got fused together into Tyrion, and that's why he has different colored eyes. It's a chimera baby, which would be crazy. It'd be crazy if it happened. Very specific genetic condition, but if he has these like different abilities, maybe he can do all sorts of different magical things right and left from different sides of his body and everything. But I don't know. I do think it takes away from the fact that like he has such a rough relationship with his father to not be the true son of Tywin. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It's yeah. Heterochromia is the term for it. Yeah, it's a really weird thing, and it's not like George R. R. Martin doesn't put these kind of things in, but whether he actually develops it is another thing. Time traveling fetus. Yeah, those ideas. I should probably read the full time traveling fetus theory at some point, but oh my! There's a CSI episode where his man was able to rape multiple women, and because he was a chimera, his sperm had different DNA from the rest of his body. Jeez, I mean, chimera frequency is incredibly low. Like I want to say, chimera. Let me see what are the chances of being a chimera. Because I mean, it's not that he doesn't do things like chimera can cause, can make hermaphrodites. It's not like he doesn't have all these albinos floating around and people with somewhat rare genetic conditions. But I'm trying to think of like the probability of because first of all, like being a serial rapist is a fairly infrequent thing. Serial rapists being like most rape seems to actually happen between people that know each other, while these like stranger serial rapists who like jump out of a bush or whatever are much less common. And so you've got, and then he would have to be a chimera on top of that. Like, it's like, I'm trying to think, I mean, I'm trying to find the frequency of it, but it seems like a 1 in a billion kind of thing. Like, what are the chances of that? Oh, your grandma might be a chimera. You're no son of mine. You're my daughter. I mean, he does run into that hermaphrodite later. I mean, maybe it was like, maybe it was seeding. Maybe George R. R. Martin was seeding a plot point. What do you think Rhaegar Targaryen read that made him realize it seems I must be a warrior? I think that Rhaegar Targaryen was not the first in the family to be doing this sort of thing. We have evidence of Aerys the First. Everyone used to say that he was a bookworm and he was constantly worried about prophecies and things like this. And he was convinced by Bloodraven to marry a different person than he wanted to marry because of prophecy or something to pass on his kingship and things like this. There's also Duncan Targaryen. I think that's the son of Egg. I think he, the Prince of Dragonflies. He went off into the woods and like tried to marry some daughter of a woods witch, things like that. Like clearly wouldn't have been doing that if he wasn't trying to fulfill some sort of prophecy. So these sorts of things seem to be pretty frequent in the Targaryen family tree. Aryan bright flame, drinking dragon fire and wanting to be reborn as a dragon, all sorts of stuff. So it's whether they're receiving dragon dreams, like even even the Blackfires, Daemon Blackfire II was receiving dragon dreams and things like this. So they're receiving all these dreams and prophecies. They're reading it in books. They're reading these prophecies. They all think they're the prince that was promised. They all think they're Azor Ahai, and so they keep. I think Rhaegar is no different than any of these other people. What am I doing here? I think he's not special. He just, rather than wanting to marry the daughter of a woods witch he decided the path to go was Lyanna. It was the same thing. I think Aegon the Unworthy kept banging different women and trying to have different children and stuff like this. Like I think the reason for all of this is just that they all think that they're somehow fulfilling prophecy and that they need to be super special. Here we go. Is this the Chimera? 1 in 5 million? 1 in 5 million. So the chances of a Chimera also being a serial rapist, it's pretty low. Pretty low. Let's see. Man, a lot of people thought jump out of a bush. It's funny. Not the, why do they call it China 3? I think they're just, they're just talking about. At the time, what they're telling her that she's the sister of Viserys and Rhaegar, but of course, if she's something else, she's not really of that. But she's got 3 dragons, child of 3. It's some weird wording of it, right? Like when you say I'm a child of 3, you usually think about the siblings, but a child of 3 dragons, that works as well. A lot of stuff works like that. It's just so ambiguous. Like you can have honestly anything when like a lot of people ask me to do breakdowns of patch face prophecies and stuff like that, and it's just like, well, you can do anything. Like anything fits those things. Like almost anything. I've seen Wheel of Time. I finished up Wheel of Time. And I did like the show. I didn't think, because I read the first book and I watched the show, and I didn't think they matched up as one being an adaptation of the other. Some people have told me that, well, it's because they're taking character traits later on and applying them retroactively to the characters. Um, because having read the first book, there's just so many different characters that are introduced earlier who play bigger roles. Like the bard is bigger in the book. The prophecy woman comes in a lot earlier in the book, and when they talk to her, it's not like this big thing, like, oh my gosh, this is the most important thing in the world. They're just like, oh, she told us some prophecies. Okay. Um, the love between Rand and Egwene is not as big in the books. There's different things that they weight. Like Matt being kind of dark and evil certainly doesn't feel like a thing in the first book, and everybody says, oh, this is all stuff later that they're bringing back and placing in. I was like, okay. So I mean, I do like them. I thought they're both good. It's just one didn't seem like an adaptation of the other. And I understand why they do these sorts of things, but and I think it came out okay. Like, the Aes Sedai are filled with so much passion in the show, and they're so stoic in the books. And it's like, okay, I understand why they made that change. Like, you don't want everyone to be like Daenerys in the show, where she's just stoic all the time and boring. And stoic Aes Sedai might be super boring. So, okay, let's make them passionate, regular people. Okay. It works. So it got renewed for 2 more seasons. So that's pretty good. I guess I don't know if they'll make it through all 15 books or whatever. Or what they'll deal with the slog period that everyone talks about. But for what it was, I didn't have high expectations, but for what it was good. It was well acted. They skipped over a lot, but it was okay. It was okay. Dun, dun, dun. Arion was reborn in heaven as a dragon. That's true. That's true. What if we find out later that actually, like, Drogon is really Arion, like, reborn, the dragon reborn? I do wonder about, now having read some of Wheel of Time, how much George R. R. Martin references Wheel of Time in the story. Like, there's definitely a lot of phrases that are used the same. They were good friends, and obviously there's a lot of references to Robert Jordan, especially in Dorne. But at the same time, like, they're telling very, very different stories. George R. R. Martin really trying to be gritty and real and subvert expectations constantly. And so when you hear about things like Dragon Reborn, and Arion wanting to be reborn as a dragon, like, is he making reference to Wheel of Time, or is being reborn a dragon just so every day that it wouldn't matter, like, because that's just. I recently read an article about there's some British girl pop group that sued Taylor Swift for her song "Shake It Off," because some of the lines in "Shake It Off" are like, "Players gonna play and haters gonna hate," and it's like, that was just things that people said, especially in the '90s. Players gonna play, haters gonna hate. And so it went to the judge, and the judge said, a player, a person doing their profession is not unique. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's banal. Like, players gonna play. Yes, that's what they do. Like, haters gonna hate. So he dismissed the case and ruled in favor of Taylor Swift. But I do wonder about like Dragon Reborn. Like, is that just so common that it's, how can we even think of it as being a reference? Do you think there's a good reason they removed Patchface from the show? Oh man, Patchface would have been great. He would have been a wonderfully creepy. He just doesn't. He's such a colorful, odd character to be in the middle of Stannis's entourage. Like Stannis is such a brutal, serious man, and he's surrounded by brutal, serious people. His daughter being kind of the one exception. And then there's just this fool, this crazy fool who's creepy and weird, and Stannis of all people is like, yeah, fine, he can stay. Like, why? Like, it's so odd. It's so odd. Because it's not like Melisandre likes him. She doesn't, right? And so I guess Shireen is the only reason Stannis would allow him. But he kept him around before Shireen was even born. So I don't even know why. So it was just really, really odd that Stannis even keeps him around. It's outside of his personality. It's just and he just kind of ignores him. So I can understand them wanting to remove Patchface because it's really hard to keep all of the scenes with Stannis really serious and dour. And when there's this fool in the background saying, under the sea, rain falls up, like what? But I do think there's something lost. Like, it's such an odd, like, picture, this weirdo dude. Like, I mean, I think he was removed because they had too many characters and they wanted to keep everything kind of grounded and serious around Stannis. And having this guy in the way, when Stannis, throws Melisandre on the table to give her a boning, it's a little awkward if Patchface has to leave the room. Or maybe he likes to watch, I don't know. But it's just, it's too bad. We're talking about Daenerys being the mother of three or the child of three. I mean, it depends. I mean, she's a child and she happens to be a mother of three if she's a mother of dragons, but she's not really the mother of dragons. I mean, she hatched them, so she's still a child that has three dragons, child of three. It all depends how linguistically you want to play this kind of stuff. But I'm not going to take if we're looking for like ideas of Daenerys being trueborn, it's hard to take like the hive-minded nature of some weirdos in Karth as like truth. Like, they also have a lot of information wrong. Like, first off, this is a thing. Okay, when we start talking about the House of the Undying, like prophecies, it's just let's see here. Let's go. We got to go back here. Okay. Shrink me up here. So there's all sorts of little things. Like, first of all, like, we have a vision of Rhaego, and Rhaego has white Targaryen hair, but brown, tan, Dothraki skin. Now, that's a little weird because every other situation that we've ever seen in history of Targaryens intermarrying produced brown hair, not the white hair. So it was really weird for him to have the white hair and the tan skin. You're obviously supposed to think of that, the brown skin of Dothraki and the white hair of Targaryens, but why would the dark hair of a Dothraki be uh, recessive over Targaryen silver hair, when in the past we show that been shown that this isn't the case. And or here's another one, like, upon a towering barbed throne sat an old man with rich robes, like, and her dad wasn't old. Her dad was in his early 40s. Like, he's not old. And so they get a lot of these things wrong. Or when this next one, Viserys, he thought, next time she paused, a second glance. The man had her brother's hair, but he was taller, and his eyes were dark and indigo. Aegon, said the woman nursing a newborn from a great wooden bed. What better name for a king? We know that they had separate bedrooms. So, now, is he down in her room or something? Like, there's all these things that are off. Like the Prince of Dragonstone, like their home was what? They actually had two homes, right? They retcon that on, but there was something about being that they're in the nursery. Like, why is she up on a big bed in their bedroom rather not down in the nursery? And I know that they slept in different places. There's all sorts of little things that don't really make sense. There are a lot of things that are wrong about the House of the Undying, which is an interesting thing. Let's see. Is that even that line? Let them be king of the ashes. Let them be charred bones and cooked meat. I'm trying to remember if that's even the line that Jaime says is the right one. But, they're not necessarily omnipotent. They're receiving probably visions from somewhere. Let's see. It's going to be what, Jaime 4? So he says, let Robert be king over charred bones and cooked meat. And here it's let him be the king of ashes. Let him be king over charred bones and cooked meat. It's close. I'm not saying it's not close, but it's not the same. I'll give him naught but ashes. Let Robert be king over charred bones and cooked meats. The Targaryens never bury their dead, they burn them. It's not the same. There's now, okay, maybe Jamie's paraphrasing. I don't know, man. I heard him tell Rossert, but I'll give him naught but ashes. Let Robert be king over charred bones and cooked meat. That sounds like a direct quote to me. The Targaryens never bury their dead, they burn them. I mean, it's so we can't really take everything that the House of Undying says as being absolute truth. It's they can be wrong. They can be wrong. Let's see, back here. The Wheel of Time seasons 1 to season 8 sucked. Time traveling Bran here. Okay. You could say maybe, episodes, season 1. I don't know. Is Patchface banging Stannis' wife? So this is the rumor of Littlefinger that Littlefinger had a whole bunch of weird stuff. He actually has granted they needed a character to do exposition on Stannis and Florent. God damn, my brain these days. Solis, yeah, Solis Florent. The and one of the things he put forward is that actually she was banging her fool as well, which no, of course that's not really happening. But that brings up an interesting point of A Clash of Kings, that there is this weird obsession that Littlefinger has with her Queen Selyse specifically, that he's the one that knows about her bringing in Melisandre and various things going on with her house, and so it's a weird moment actually. And again, they needed, it might be something as small as they needed someone to bring in this information, but it's let's bring back the. Surely did not mean that Selyse was bringing a fool into her bed. Yeah. Oh, actually, Varys is the one that first introduces the information that Selyse has brought in the Red Priest, but he I guess paid attention. Stannis spent most of his marriage being apart from his wife. Not that I fault him. I'd do the same if I were married to Selyse. He does have some other interest in their house later on. I'm forgetting exactly what it was. I have to go back, and it's been many years since I did the Littlefinger debt scheme. But there's some interesting stuff with that. I mean, this is what people say, but this means that, so this is on why Stannis is keeping Patchface around. That Patchface was left from the ship that his parents died, and that he was the only survivor from the shipwreck. And this is kind of this idea that somehow Stannis is sentimental, and it's a little contradictory because is Stannis very sentimental? Like he does have this weird peach speech about Renly, but then he also doesn't have much good to say about Robert and things like that. Certainly never brings up his dad and never talks about his dad fondly or anything like this. In fact, the person that really raised him was Cresson. He barely speaks about Cresson, except to say like, "Oh, I had a maester who was like a father to me." I mean, once, he certainly lets Cresson kill himself. He lets Renly die. He's willing to go to war against Renly. So it's some odd things that he's keeping Patchface around for sentimental reasons. I mean, if we had confirmation of, like, it would be outside of his personality, but it would be interesting if true. Like, later on, if somebody asks him, like, why do you keep Patchface around? Oh, it's for sentimental reasons. Well, it's interesting because it goes against every other aspect of his personality. But I mean, it may be the cover. Like, maybe Stannis thought he was funny in his youth. I mean, I think Cresson said he was different when he was a boy. So it may be that, like, maybe Stannis really liked him and Shireen likes him. Maybe Stannis is really into it. Like, maybe he likes a good fool, who are we to judge entertainment back then? They didn't have much, We're sitting here talking about Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime, but, they just had a fool. They're like, what are you going to watch this? What are you going to watch tonight? The fool's going to come in. It's going to do some funny stuff. Oh man, have you seen this fool? Man, have you seen The Singer? Oh yeah, no, it's good stuff. You got to see him. Mm-hmm. Patchface is the equivalent of Darth Jar Jar. Oh. Um, was Mary Masdor justified? I mean, it's just kind of revenge, right? And she's killing. I don't know. I mean, it depends if you think vengeance is ever justified, or if you think that the Cal's call would go on to to cause more damage, which it definitely was going to. It's still going to probably cause more damage. Um, we bring the, they bring up this philosophical idea a lot. Like if you you know, Pycelle brings it up. Like, aren't we saving a lot more people by killing Daenerys now than letting her lead to a war later? And there's certainly a philosophical question to that. If it, is it justified for all the death and destruction that the Dothraki already gave to her village? I don't know. It's not like there's a legal system that, normally I'd be like, oh, vigilante justice, but there's no legal system to bring Drogo to justice. And the Lazarene, are not a martial people, but they this gets into, when I talk about the Kimdissi philosophy. In Dying of the Light, they start talking about the idea of this civilization called Kimdis, and they're pacifists. But how can pacifists survive in a world of people that are violent and horrible? And the answer was, well, they have to figure out trickster methods in order to bring about these sorts of results. So the idea that she tricks Dany into doing things, or applies a poison or whatever. I mean, if Mirri Maz Duur applied the poison herself, then that's not really pacifist. But then again, I mean, we don't even have like full 100% proof that Mirri Maz Duur actually did anything to Khal Drogo. He might have just died on his own, and then she took credit for it. These are, there's big philosophical questions. Like in a structured system where there is no justice for murderous acts, like, is vigilante justice justified? I mean, if there's nothing else, there's nothing else. I mean, I guess Mirri Maz Duur is justified. It's pretty. What are we gonna do? They patch face drowned. Have you seen the news where U.S. diplomats in China and Russia were getting attacked with radio frequency weapons? Yeah, this is called the Havana Syndrome. This is something that no one knows the cause right now, but people it started in Havana, and no one really knows what caused it. I think the prevailing theory is that it was the Russians, but that's usually just kind of because of lack of evidence. Everybody just kind of just goes to that. But yeah, some State Department employees were going deaf because of these unheard sonic weapons. It's pretty scary. Impregnation with squishers. Opening scene of Hamlet. Watchmen encounter a ghost. Bran 1 Act 1 Scene 2. Hamlet learns about his father's ghost. Unlike Hamlet, Ned ignores the warnings, beheads free will. Well, I mean, that would work, except for it's Garrett who's beheaded by Ned in in the book. They swap them for the show. In the show, it's Will that gets beheaded, but in the book, it's Garrett. So If only there were a pun with Frigerd, but yeah. But I don't know how many. There's not too many Hamlet references in Ice and Fire, as far as I know. There's a couple here and there. I mean, obviously there's a Shakespeare reference, obviously, with Titus Andronicus and the meat pies. Titus Andronicus was actually Shakespeare's most successful play, and it's about a guy who has a bunch of sons and a daughter, and most of his sons die in war, and then this weird the emperor and this weird trickster guy decide that they want to ruin Titus Andronicus, so they end up cutting off the hands of his daughter and her tongue and raping her, and her they capture his sons and say that they'll give him back if Titus Andronicus cuts off his hands. And so he cuts off his hands and gives him the hands, and the sons are already dead. And so Titus Andronicus, his entire family has been destroyed, and he has no hands, and his daughter is handless and tongueless and raped. And so he wants to get revenge on the emperor. So he kills the emperor's kids and bakes him into a pie and feeds him the pie, and then kills him after he feeds him the pie. And then he takes the trickster and buries him up to his neck and allows him to die of thirst. It's a really brutal. I mean, it's essentially an exercise in thinking of the most horrific thing that one could, which is the exercise of Titus Andronicus. And it's just so disgusting and horrible that this like eating your children in a pie thing, which comes from Greek mythology. I think it's I used to be into Greek mythology. I totally forgot about it, but there is a tale from Greek mythology which involves it, and there's a reason that some of these stories like sit around in our mind. Like, for instance, one of the strongest tales of all that has endured the test of time is Oedipus. And the reason that Oedipus stands the test of time is that having sex with one's mother is the most horrific thing, is one of the most horrific things one can imagine. And so cross-culturally, mother-son sex is taboo in every culture on Earth, which is a really curious thing. It's very biological. In fact, even among apes, you don't see mother-son sex. There is a species of bonobo that has sex all day, and like there's some accidental sex that happens in those situations, but no one seeks out sex with their mother. And so it's such a horrific thought that like it essentially has scarred people, and so it makes the tale so memorable. So, accidentally eating one's children is such a horrific tale that it kind of it sticks in people's heads as being so horrible. I mean, there's a few others like murdering your brother. Cain and Abel sticks in people's heads because it's the worst way to go. Like, having your entire family die, like Job. Everyone drowning. Like, these are pretty horrific ideas, and they stick in people's heads because they're so memorable. And so it made it into Ice and Fire. Do you think Danny Aegon will take over Stannis' story and unite the people surviving winter? Like how Stannis is taking over Rob's story, liberating the North. I mean, the whole Azor Ahai prophecy, Prince that was promised prophecy of uniting people is pretty universal at this point. I mean, you have the Stallion, the Mouse of the World, you have Azor Ahai, you have the Prince that was promised. You have all these other ones that are in the World of Ice and Fire. So, I mean, uniting people is just kind of the inevitable course of the story, right? Like, And so it's a pretty general prophecy. So the fact that like a person's gonna fulfill it is just kind of a given. Will it be Danny? Sure, probably. I don't know if Aegon's going to do it. I mean, I think the idea is that Danny's going to arrive and have a second dance with the dragons with Aegon, and eventually defeat Aegon. Whether Aegon will have a dragon at this point is unknown. But I think they gave, for the most part, the Aegon story to Cersei in the show. But the idea is that by the time Daenerys gets there, Aegon will likely have a large hold on Westeros, and she'll have to fight another Targaryen in a second Dance of the Dragons. And we know this second Dance of the Dragons because George R. R. Martin said in an interview once, like he was asked a question about the Dance of the Dragons, and he said the first or the second. And of course, there's only one historically, so the second Dance of the Dragons would have to be Daenerys versus Aegon. So I think that she'll be uniting people, and this idea is that she's fulfilling the dragon, the stallion mouth of the world, Azor Ahai, Prince that was promised kind of idea. But lots of people are going to be uniting people. And I mean, Mance Rayder did it. Mance Rayder united everybody, Is Jon going to unite everybody? So, and then I was stuck thinking about whether Stannis is really liberating the North. But Rob never had a liberating story. Like Rob didn't liberate anybody. He was now I guess he did turn around because he wanted to get rid of the Ironborn. But Stannis only took one Ironborn. He only took Deepwood Mott from the Ironborn. I mean, I guess Ramsay ended up fulfilling Rob's story by taking over Moat Cailin. So who knows? And Ramsay took Winterfell. So in a sense, Ramsay has taken more of Rob's story than Stannis. Just saying. To know is Preston. Yeah, this is me. Will book 6 ever come out? I say if it's not announced this year, I'd say it's never coming out. That's my my prediction. Will A Dance with Dragons be less? Will you like it less if Quentin's really dead? Yeah, I'd like it less. I mean, I think there's a good chance that I think when George R. R. Martin wrote the Quentin chapters, he left a lot of clues that Quentin could be alive, but if he never gets around to writing Quentin, he can just keep him dead. And this is just a Hollywood technique. Like, oh, they never found a body. If I want to bring back the villain, I can. If I don't want to bring back the villain, I don't have to. That kind of thing. I constantly bring up Murdoch from MacGyver, whose body was never found, and yet they canceled the show. So I guess he died in that mine shaft. But so yeah, I'd like Quentin to return. It's a very crowded story. I understand it's a crowded story, but I think it would be very, very interesting. For a lot of reasons. I don't know who's going to deliver a dragon to Aegon, for example. I don't know, how you'd write a story about a boy going off to war and not having him come back with PTSD, which is George R. R. Martin's like thing that he loves writing about. Because he kind of feels that he has PTSD even though he never fought in Vietnam. That he just had all this he was obsessed with Vietnam, and he had all this empathy for all these people dying in Vietnam, and that he kind of felt that he was experiencing trauma over the incident, even though he never went. And so he has a lot of stories about PTSD and war, and Ice and Fire is a story about how bad war is and comes from his anti-Vietnam childhood. And, Quentin looks like George R. R. Martin. If you look at the description of Quentin, he looks like George R. R. Martin. He goes off to war. He fights in war. He observes all of the trauma of war. That's what the bulk of the Quentin story is. And so it's really rough in my mind to have, why spend all of this time giving Quentin a trauma only to have him die? And instead of coming back with that PTSD and having changed as a character. I think it's a big waste to have Quentin be dead. And I think I think people that interpret Quentin as, some sort of subverted expectations of a hero is I think it's the wrong way to see it. That he's supposed to represent the sacrifice that fathers make by sending their boys off to war, and the trauma that soldiers go through. I'd like to see a series on Benjen Cold Hands and the nature of him being white. Is he sentient, controlled? Well, we know that Benjen is not Cold Hands in the book, and we know this because somebody went down to Texas and pulled out his George R. R. Martin's notes on to his editor, and in the margin, the editor had asked, "Is this Benjen?" And George R. R. Martin wrote no. So now what Benjen is doing or where he is, who knows? I mean, but we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, it's the question of what could Benjen be doing all of this time if he's not Cold Hands? Like, better have something good for him. I don't know. It's just all of the wildlings all go south, like, and he's not with them. Craster gets killed. He's not with them. Everybody at Hardhome is getting killed. I just don't know where he could be. I mean, he could be hanging with Stone Snake. We don't know where Stone Snake went. For those who don't remember, in A Clash of Kings, when Corin Halfhand goes up with John, he's got some dudes traveling with him, and one of them is Stone Snake, who climbs off and is just missing from our story, and we never know. So I'm guessing Benjen and if Benjen returns, he's going to be with Stone Snake. I'm putting some money down on that. But if we're ever going to get any more. Now Cold Hands being sentient, I think he's as sentient as Lady Stoneheart or something like that. But he does seem to be controlled. I mean, he's definitely sent to get Sam, and he's definitely sent to the Wall and things like this. So, I mean, he's still receiving messages, I suppose, from whoever, whether it be Bloodraven or the Children of the Forest or a time-traveling Bran or whoever. Not sure. Let's see, where are we at? Haven't there been any technological or scientific breakthroughs in centuries in the world of Ice and Fire? It does seem that there's been regression, right? So we clearly, like, you look at the structure like the Wall or Storm's End, and these are things that could not be made by the current population. So I think the idea is that things are going backwards in time rather than forwards. So I'm trying to think if anything technologically recently has come out. For example, like at one point, Victorian finds a telescope, and he's like, "Oh, this is really clever, little mirrorish lens and everything. That's pretty neat." But we don't know how long those have been around, right? So those could actually have been around thousands of years. We don't know. It's pretty far advanced for a medieval society to have, anything like that. But there's a lot of things, like in the world of medicine, for example, they're really far advanced. Like their knowledge of medicine is 20th century kind of levels, where they're sterilizing stuff. Like people didn't do that in the 19th century. They didn't know about, little bugs on stuff that could cause infection, or their way of like treating infection and their survival rates of infection are way high. But we don't know if these are new things. Like, the only things we kind of have is a perception of things in Dunk and Egg's time, and they all seemed kind of the same. Um, what we kind of know about is maybe we can see an Iron Age developing. Like when the Andals, like clearly there was a Bronze Age with the height of Myronese Giscari society, and they weren't using steel. And then the Andals developed steel, but then again, there was already steel with the Ironborn, and steel swords being used on crypts or whatever in Winterfell. So none of it really kind of makes sense either. Like the order of technology and the order of events and technological progress doesn't really make sense in George R. R. Martin's like narrative, and I guess it's not supposed to. I suppose the written language like came about um, to take over like runes and stuff and like history. If we count that as a technological breakthrough, the written language is probably one. Um, so that's a few thousand years old, but that's about it. I mean, essentially, we're seeing a lot of regression, a lot of contradiction. But if there's anything, the development of written language and the development of iron. Um, but that's about it. We just don't have the information on everything else. Uh, mm, mm, mm. Stannis witnessed as a brother. Stannis witnessed his big brother live life with emotion. First, raw emotion, lust, vengeance, love. Stannis hides all as his because Robert did not. I mean, that's certainly the idea behind the character, that we're going to have a brother that's the exact opposite of Stannis. Um, Calculated, cold, distant, um, uh, reserved. That's definitely the idea. Um, and then, I mean, I don't know how like Renly fits in with it. I guess Renly is just a lot more like Robert, except a little more intelligent. Not that Robert was an idiot, but he's smarter than people let on. But yeah, the idea is that Stannis is just the exact opposite of his brother. Certainly, like in a literary sense, that's what's being done. In fact, I want to say that Cresson makes some sort of comment about this, about the brothers. Um, what's interesting is that, by the way, is that Stannis is secretly Cresson's favorite. I always thought that was really, really an interesting idea. Is that he just needed? I guess he felt that Stannis needed the most love, and he wasn't necessarily getting it. He specifically says, "I loved you better than Robert, even or Renly, for you were the one unloved and the one who needed me most." Um, I really like. I love the prologue of A Clash of Kings. I love Cresson as a character. I love him so much, um, and it's so sad and heartbreaking seeing him die. Uh, and I would love to see more reference to him later on, especially from Stannis's perspective on how he really felt about him. Um, but yeah, it's kind of entirely the point that Robert was this overachiever who got all the attention, who had everything handed to him, and loved life and was living life to the fullest. And Stannis is this colder, awkward guy who's getting shafted constantly, and um, it comes out in who he is and how he handles the world later on. Is George R. R. Martin setting up a John Val romance? Yeah, definitely. He's definitely setting that up. You can't deny the sort of weird sexual chemistry between John and Val before she goes off north of the wall, and it's he needs that because John has to be a sucker to Val, Like, there's no reason for Jon to really trust and let Val leave. And so he kind of needed Jon to be a sucker. We have a lot of, I mean, George R. R. Martin loves doing this because I think he feels that in his own life, he was a sucker to various women over the years, that he trusted people that he shouldn't have trusted because he was smitten with them. And so I think that's definitely the aspect. At least Jon has feelings for Val. Whether Val has feelings for Jon, that's some questions. But it's interesting because if you look at like how Jon feels about Val, in these early descriptions of Val, he calls her like pretty. And then later on, he starts describing her as like absolutely beautiful. And you're like, it's definitely like growing on him. But I mean, I think it's also supposed to be similar in the sense that like Daenerys is a sucker as well for her romantic interests. Tyrion is a sucker for his romantic interests. Jaime is a sucker for his romantic interests. Robb is a sucker for his romantic interests. Like, it kind of goes on and on and on, that the thing that these people keep getting fooled about is romance. I mean, he tries to make it like, two-sided. The fact that like Daenerys is just as much of a sucker as everybody else, that they're all fooled. But whether or not, it'll be consummated, like, will there be time? I don't know. But I mean, he needed at least have that flirting for Jon to trust Val. She shouldn't have been trusted. Who knows what she was doing? Who knows? I've been listening to you since the pink letter. Did you ever think your channel would get this big? No, definitely not. I mean, in the very beginning, when you first start a channel and you see 100 people view your stuff, you're like, oh my God, this is a huge big deal. And then when stuff started exploding into the thousands and tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands, like, it starts getting a little odd, starts getting a little weird. Like, I went to a con once, and I remember standing in line and somebody recognizing my voice. This is before I really showed my face. And I was like, and she was like, oh, wow, that's you. I was like, oh, wow, okay. So it's interesting. That's the interesting thing about life, is that life in general is more interesting than I could have imagined it, which is pretty nice. Jon's dream where he kills Robb, tells him his place is at the wall, not Winterfell. I think he'll go to Hardhome instead, abandon his boyhood dream. I mean, if there's time, I think the way we imagined, fans kind of imagined that Jon was going to spend some time in Ghost's body for a good portion of the Winds of Winter and then return. But then the show kind of changed people's opinion, like, oh, maybe he's going to come back like immediately or really quickly. So there's a question of what Jon will have time, for. Like, when will his perspective come back? When will he be resurrected? So I don't know. I mean, Catelyn was dumped in a river and, was probably in that river for at least a day before being found. I mean, let's say at most, like, she was in that river a few days. So I guess she was. The question is, how long can Robb's body go? I mean, it's frozen and cold. Maybe it'll be preserved. I don't know. I would like Jon to spend time in Ghost's body myself. I think that's a more interesting place for Jon's character to go. I think that people thought that the wolf thing is because there's a passage in Melisandre's channel perspective where she says she sees a man and then a wolf and then a man. And so it's a little odd because later she calls Jon a boy within the same set of paragraphs. So it's a little weird, but then again, Jon's on the border of manhood and boyhood, between boyhood and manhood. So who knows? I mean, if he'll go to Hardhome, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see the Whites. But that would follow the show more, right? That we would actually get to see Hardhome from his perspective. But We'll see. We'll see if there's time. Well, the time for anything. I mean, when I think of like the Winds of Winter and what needs to happen in that book, like it's really unreal because you've got to close off all of the four major battles at the beginning, right? You know, Winterfell, Storm's End, Marine, and Old Town. And those battles will take at least a quarter of the book. And so then you have to have Aegon, you know, establishing control over all of Westeros, and it being kind of seen as a normal kind of thing. And then I could kind of see like Daenerys coming in at the very end of the book to begin sort of the end, because she's got to go to Vastoth Rock, maybe go to Karth, go back to Marine, things like this. Volantis, eventually get there. So it's a lot. So from the northern perspective, you've got to resolve the war, resolve all the battles, which is going to take some time. Unite the North. You know, how fast can you do that? Considering how slow the pace of war was in a Dance with Dragons, you know, you'd have to go back to like a Game of Thrones level like speed when it came to battles, which would be a little jarring to all of a sudden be like, and then this happened, and then time passed, because we've already seen a few of the sample chapters, and it's still going slow. So, you know, would he have time to go up to Hardhome? If he did, then, you know, I guess the plot he would go to Hardhome and back, and that would pretty much be the entire story for. And maybe he'd be preparing for uniting the North at the end, or fighting Ramsay. It'd be really be tough. So much stuff. So much stuff to fit in. Let's see. We've been doing this 2.5. I'm losing my voice. Epilogue John is how maybe I would do it. You know, or Epilogue Ghost. You know, is how, if I would, it was the way I would do it. But when they say that John is 16, they mean inches. And I'm not referring to his height. So I'll discuss. I discussed very briefly because we're going to be talking about Hodor in the next time traveling Bran, and how old Hodor is. But it's weird because like John will always talk about him. Oh, I'm almost 15, almost a man grown. There's one line in A Storm of Swords from Catelyn's perspective where she says, "Robb is 15, a man grown." So I guess, you know, it's official that 16 is the age of adulthood for men. But it's hard to say. Everybody still calls Robb a boy after that, and they still get angry, and they still call Theon a boy, and he's 19 or 20 years old. So, you know, what are you going to do? King John and Queen Satin for the win. See, there's so many points of view that I'd rather, like, not that I don't like John. People always accuse me of hating John, but it's not that I don't like John. He's fine, but there's so many more interesting characters that would be great perspectives. Like, wouldn't Satin's perspective be one of the most fascinating ones at the Wall? Like this ex-sex worker who's been around the world, who is being trained to be a man, like, and to be a warrior and all these sorts of things. It's a crazy transformation when you think about how interesting Satin's character is. He would be great. Like a Satin epilogue, a Satin prologue would be much more interesting than anything else you're going to get, you know. Oh my. Let's see. Somebody's saying I missed some super chats. Let's go back. Oh. Oh yeah, Thacides, the pie guy. Yeah, I think um, it's the cannibalism Greek mythology. Yeah, I want to say it's Lycaon, legendary king of Arcadia, and he eats his son Priam, something like that. I don't know. There's probably a bunch of them. That's the thing, is there's probably a bunch of cannibalism tales because cannibalism is just such a taboo, and cannibalism of your own child is just like the most horrible thing to think about. So like it's gonna stick in people's heads. And this is exactly why Human Centipede like became a meme for society, right? Like it's such a ridiculously horrible idea that everyone's gonna remember it like forever because it's just ridiculous. Like and then it's a little bit of trauma. I mean, it's just it's why motherfucker is like an insult. Like there's nothing more horrific than fucking your mother. So that's gonna be in it. Um, Fulton, Quentin, the Uniting, Rhaegar. Oh, do you think Rob is worse than Joff? I missed this one. Um, these are these things of like the road to hell being paved with good intentions. Like obviously, like Rob is a on a personal level, he's a better human being and than Joffrey. But when we start thinking about who's caused like more destruction and harm to the world, um, it's Rob. And I think that's somewhat intentional that Rob had such good intentions, and it led horrible to horrible consequences, while Joffrey is this horrible person. And for example, Rome prospered under Nero. Like, am I gonna say that Nero wasn't like batshit crazy kind of dude? Like, no, he definitely was, but they also had like a booming economy and it was pretty prosperous. I mean, up until it was 17 years, and then there was the big civil war at the end. But the what? So it's these tough things about like who can be if you're a bad person, does that make you a bad leader? If you're a good person, does that make you a good leader? Um, I don't think people necessarily think that. For instance, everybody brings up the Jimmy Carter example. Like Jimmy Carter was the best human being to ever be president of the United States. Just wonderful, wonderful human being. You cannot say anything bad about him on a personal level. And then people say, well, was he an effective leader? Well, did it, it's hard to say. I think Jimmy Carter was dealt a bad hand, but he wasn't reelected. He wasn't able to win people to his side. I don't think he was as bad as people think he was, but you know, um, and then it's like, well, Bill Clinton, like, oh, this is this womanizer. Well, he also like brought about like the greatest like prosperity of America and peace and surpluses and things like this. Yeah, he was a liar womanizer who took advantage of an intern and cheated on his wife and all of these things, but at the same time, like a very effective leader. And these are examples that people often use. So Joffrey, I mean, when you're trying to stabilize the kingdom and bring about peace, and you're largely on the defense versus Rob, who's largely on the offense. I mean, Tywin is the one that was implementing all of these horrible on the ground policies. That wasn't even Joffrey. So it's like, I don't know. It's really tough. It's tough to say. Like what is worse. You know, whether you can if you're a good person and you bring about the death of a million people, you know, versus a guy who's only murdered one person and is doesn't hasn't hurt anybody else. It's the question of the train and the train tracks and how many people you're going to kill and things like this. It's morality is fuzzy, um, and a lot of it's based on luck as well. Like if you beat somebody who say killed somebody as a drunk driver, you're like, oh yeah, I once was a drunk driver and I ran into a car and I killed a mother and her baby. You'd be like, that person's horrible. That's a horrible human being. He was a drunk driver and he is responsible for the death of a woman and her baby. But at the same time, there's just a huge probability to that. Like he could have gotten drunk and gone home and nothing happened. And there's lots of people who get drunk, blackout drunk, go home and go to bed and just didn't happen to hit anybody. And we don't think of them as being horrible, horrible people. And they're not going to jail, for involuntary manslaughter and all sorts of things. We may, some of you may have been those person that was really drunk on the road. Like, are you actually morally better than the person that was drunk on the road that killed a woman and her baby? It's hard to say, like these are the questions about morality. The morality is so much linked to an actual situation and chance and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, Joffrey, horrible human being. But is he responsible for more death and destruction than Robb? No, Robb is. Let's see. Did I get it? Yeah, I think I got everybody so far. Okay. Here we go. Where do you think Ned Dane will go after the Brotherhood without banners? So there's some weird aspects to the Brotherhood without banners. So if you actually look at the appendix for Feast for Crows, let's bring it up because this is the most important thing because we have no idea what the Brotherhood without banners has been doing for so long, right? But if we bring up the appendix, we get this weird kind of thing in here. Let's show this. Okay. So we've got Beric Dondarrion, once Lord of Blackhaven, 6 times slain. And it says he's dead. According to according to Thoros of Myr, he's dead. I guess we have to trust that he's dead. We're not sure. However, we see some other people listed under Beric Dondarrion who are not listed with Lady Stoneheart. So Lady Stoneheart has her followers: Lem Lemoncloak, Thoros of Myr, Harwin, Jack B. Lucky, Tom Sevens. We meet all of these people in Brienne's chapter. The guy with the northern accent is Harwin. We meet Thoros. Lem has the helmet. Jack B. Lucky is there. Town of Sevens is there. Well, Tom of Sevens is in the Jaime chapter. So they're all here. But then where did Anguy go? Where did Greenbeard go? Where did the Mad Huntsman go? Where did Edric Dane go? We don't know. There clearly was a split because, and they still seem to be following Beric Dondarrion, like the Beric Dondarrion faction. So some people theorize that Beric isn't actually dead, that he continued on. And some people think like, okay, maybe Greenbeard is now leading that faction. He seemed to be the next person in line with authority. So it could be that there's this other Brotherhood without banners that are doing other things. Some people talk about, there might have been a hideout in the neck when Jaime visits Derry. They talk about how it's so hard to get to find the Brotherhood without banners, and they keep disappearing up into the neck. And we know that that's not where Catelyn is. Catelyn is in a cave, and not far from the Inn at the Crossroads. So they're in different locations. So some people think that maybe Beric Dondarrion's group is hiding up in the neck with Howland Reed or something. We see this character named Swampy Meg. This character hasn't ever appeared anywhere, but there's some woman named Swampy Meg. So I guess maybe she's in the swamps of the neck. So if I were to guess, and we're basing this completely on this appendix, is that the other faction of the Brotherhood is somewhere sitting in the neck, surviving, doing some other things. So I don't know, but I can only assume that Ned Dane is with Greenbeard and the Mad Huntsman and Swampy Meg and that group. There's a lot of talk, and I don't actually give much credence to it, about Ned Dane being like, oh, if there wasn't this 5-year gap, Ned Dane would be older and he would have been Darkstar. I don't actually think that's true. I think people make a big deal of the 5-year gap, and George R. R. Martin abandoned the 5-year gap really quick. I don't think he had much thought out on what would happen with all of these characters, and I don't think he was thinking about a minor character like Ned Dane and thinking about where he'd be. So, but yeah, I mean, he's a Dane because eventually George R. R. Martin is going to reveal what happened at Starfall. And so maybe he's in the neck because Howland Reed's there. And so you're eventually having, you've got two characters that might reveal what happened to the Tower of Joy and Starfall. And they're in the same place. And they can perhaps play tag team on, being exposition for, but I don't know who would even be in the neck to receive the exposition. Most of our characters are further south or further north. The only people in the Riverlands is the only point of view in the Riverlands is Jaime and Brienne, and so they would have to somehow head that way. But why wouldn't they be heading to the Vale? So I don't know. Going up to the neck just seems, with winter coming, why would anybody be doing this? But maybe one of our northern characters will, on their way down, will pass by these characters. I don't know. It's and maybe the characters will move. Maybe they'll come out. Maybe they'll come out of the neck, and we'll run into them that way. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's see here. Let's do. Well, it's getting pretty late. I've lost my voice, and we can talk some quick politics. Biden is going to make them both look capable. I mean, what's Biden done that's been bad? I don't understand this kind of stuff. What, you don't like all of those aid checks? What, you don't like, trying to get people vaccinated? What? I mean, you don't like the fact that we're not in Afghanistan anymore? What? What do you want from him? What do you want from him? No matter what side of the aisle you're from, what could you possibly want from the guy? Are sufficient? Yes. Are there sufficient fascist attitudes amongst American citizenry to threaten democracy? Of course. We had a coup a year ago with that fascist ideology. Rejecting any votes that are not their own, almost stopping trying to stop a president from being seated after being rightfully elected. Like, absolutely, these fascist ideas are growing and growing in America. I mean, if I think about just when I was young and now in America, like, geez, it's rough. Like when I was a kid, like I said, when I was a kid, I shot guns, but we didn't live in a country where people would carry around carry fully automatic weapons to protests, like political protests, like where we have like armed militias running around, like intimidating people. Like, come on, like this is I mean, yeah, we're getting super fascist. People paying attention to like it's rough stuff. I was watching Channel 5 News. Andrew Callahan. I'm sorry, and he made an interesting comment about because he interviewed the QAnon shaman recently, and he was talking about how it's interesting that the QAnon shaman was accusing everybody of pedophilia and drinking blood, and how that was the equivalent of the blood libel that was always attached to Jews throughout the century. That the worst thing you can do is claim that you're killing children, because then once somebody's killing children or being a pedophile, you're no longer human, and you can just kill them. And this is what these QAnon people like. And this language, it's not like I don't have like right-wing acquaintances. This language is in them. They'll say like, "Oh, you Democrats, you pedophiles." Like, that's QAnon language where you're immediately trying to like, just with no justification, claim that someone is inhuman enough to kill. Like when you start saying that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know who's going to rescue us, though. I mean, I don't know who can possibly rescue us. I don't know. Like I say, when you get these fascist responses, there are things that are incredibly broad like this, where you're just like, LOL, Preston's opinions are cringe. Like, there's nothing specific. There's no specific policy. It's just this general hatred. It's like I say, it's like accusing like Democrats of being pedophiles. There's no substantiation. There's no proof. There's no evidence. There's nothing specific. There's nothing even policy related. It's just this general, your side needs to be killed kind of attitude that the right wingers have. It's really rough. Like, and I'm not, this is these things. Yeah, they can storm the Capitol, but they can't say the F word. Oh, I mean, but they'll accuse if anybody else does it, they'll accuse somebody. It's this hypocrisy. Like, you can try to bring down democracy, and yet they're the good people. It's I mean, listening to the QAnon shaman, he's not that, even though he's insane, and he is, his rhetoric is not that different from what you hear from right wingers in America now. Like, it's yeah, don't know if I have the time. Like, take me one-on-one. I don't need your right wing ranting, okay, filling up my space. If you can list one single good policy that Republicans have, post it. Post one single reason why I should like a Republican. One single. Go for it. Like this thing is like Jeffrey Epstein, like, Trump was on his plane, and yet the right wingers completely ignore this too. Now, I actually don't think that just because you flew on Epstein's plane means you're a pedophile. Like, there's plenty of reasons that Donald Trump is a horrible human being. Like, just so many reasons why he's a horrible human being that I can go into specifically. But like, him knowing Jeffrey Epstein is probably not one of them. Like, I've hung out with a lot of bad people in my life. Like, at various times, I've shared a car with a lot of bad people at various times. Like, So I don't know what it means. Like when they look at it, they're like, oh well, once Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane, therefore every Democrat is drinking children's blood. Like there's no logic to that. Um, I don't know, but not prioritizing vaccines based on race. Why would anyone prioritize vaccines based on race? If you actually break down the racial data, um, the most races actually have the around the same vaccine frequency. Black people and white people are actually, it's like a 1% difference. It's not much. The one race that's really high on vaccines is American Indians, but that just had to do with like distribution during when you're organized into a tribe, like on reservations and stuff. So it's love this, etc. National security policy, etc. I'm sorry. What great things do you think the Iraq War was a great thing? Do you think invading Iraq was a great thing? Do you think that war we almost got in with Iran was a great thing? Do you think like breaking deals with Iran so they can pursue like weaponry again is a great thing? Like, how are Republicans good on national security? You're the weakest on national security. The absolute weakest. Weak on terrorism, weak on war, weak on everything. You know, Reagan ran away from Lebanon after a terrorist attack. No one ever talks about that he was the weakest. He was the worst. He was the biggest pussy when it came to when it came to terrorism. The Republicans are the weakest. In fact, this is actually a problem I'll criticize Democrats on, is that Democrats, they have to be tougher on war than Republicans, because the Republicans are the whole like gun-toting, we love the military. This kind of socialism is fine. Other types of socialism are not okay. Military socialism, police socialism, that's fine. But no, not other types of socialism. But Democrats feel like they have to be more royal than the king, and they have to like one-up them. So a lot of times Democrats will start wars. Like obviously Lyndon Johnson, you know, increasing war in Vietnam. Like Obama having a surge in Afghanistan. You know, Democrats will be insecure and feel like, well, I've got to show that I'm a strong Democrat, and so boom, they do all this stuff. When in fact, like, there's just nothing good. Like seriously, nothing good about Republican policy. Like a single thing. I'm just waiting for it. I love this. You're like, be specific. Be specific. Oh my gosh. Or this, like, what you got? Do you have a single policy? I'm waiting in the chat for a single Republican policy that is good. A single one. I mean, how many, like, do I have to wait here? Like a half an hour? Like a single one. I'm reading. I'm sorry. Here's another thing. No politician is for open borders. Not a single one. So how are you differentiating Republicans from Democrats? How? Pulling out of Afghanistan was, by the way, also bipartisan, right? So you have to differentiate your parties. So what's the differentiation? Now then you're saying you're against vax mandates? Like, what are you, an idiot? You're an anti-vaxxer? Like, what the hell? Like, still, I'm looking for one, like, printing money. Like, everybody prints money. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's dumb. Like, what are you talking about? like, seriously. I'm looking for one thing. I have very different beliefs from, I mean, if you've watched this, people know that I have very different beliefs from Hassan and Vash. I mean, I'm a capitalist for one. Like, that's kind of a big thing. I'm also like I'm a progressive. I'm not a leftist. And I will defend like the Democratic Party a lot more than them. You know, and I'm definitely here. Like, you know, like vax mandates work. Like, why wouldn't you want a vax mandate? It's how we got rid of measles. Like, how are people against vax? Like, I'm sorry, not really. You're splitting hairs at this point. I mean, like, they back when they got rid of measles and polio, they went into schools and just shot people. Like, we have none of that. Like, if you're looking for vax mandates, like, what mandates we have? That the federal employees had to get vax mandates? There was already vax mandates for us. Like, what are you talking about? Like, do you know how many vaccines a person in the military has to get when they join? It's like 30 vaccines. Like, these are ridiculous. I mean, this is really true that the main differentiation between Republicans and Democrats are on social issues. They are on things like abortion and same-sex marriage and stuff like that. I agree with that. There's a little bit of difference when it comes to what programs are spent. Like, you'll have slightly more funding for the military, for DoD under a Republican, and slightly more funding for education under Democrats. But this is on the margin. Like, the actual difference between the two when it comes to spending is like not that much. So, I mean, it is really on these big social issues. So I do say, like, one of the most important things is Supreme Court justices and how things are going to affect, But, even if you take something like guns, like, Democrats don't vote against guns. Like, Republicans don't vote against guns. So what's the difference between the parties? Like, that's an area where, I would want Democrats to step up more, but they don't. So, like, it's just because they know it's kind of political suicide, because people just freaking love to jerk off with their guns and become like, that's their identity. A lot of they don't feel like they're men. So they're like, oh, how can I feel like I'm a man? Oh, I guess I can get a gun and I can feel like a man. I can feel like a man. But I would say, the differences are mainly social issues. And that's absolutely true. This is also true. Republicans are horrible on climate and science funding, and what they choose to fund. There's a lot of, like, real Luddite stuff that they cut, especially under Bush 1. And Bush 2. Reagan and Bush 2 were, Bush 1 actually was not that bad. Bush 2 had some horrible cuts to science funding, specifically with regards to stem cell research, which I have a lot of issues with, as my father had plegia, and he could have been helped quite a bit by research in stem cell research, and it's something I take issue with, because it's just disgusting kind of stuff, and stuff that doesn't make any sense, like, scientifically. But yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that government's really good at, actually, is funding for science and innovation. A lot of people have this belief that, like, oh, the private sector does everything better. The private sector is really good at efficiently producing things that already exist, but it's actually very bad at research and development. And the government, when you actually think of some of the best inventions, like splitting the atom, like the internet, things like this, medical research, it's actually all from public funding. It's one of the best things that the government does is innovation, science innovation. Why do Republicans want a police state? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they really are imagining a state in which they're all sitting around with no control, that's what they want. But they get in this idea of worshiping police and military, which is odd, because you talk to I have plenty of cop and military friends, plenty, okay, and they come from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all political spectrums, but they have this idea that, like, that from, I think maybe from watching movies and everything, that the police are the good guys and the military is the good guys. They're always the heroes. And this is why when people tell me, like, oh, like, the left, like, runs movies, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, in every movie, like, the US military and the UN police are the good guys. Like they're always do no wrong, and all these criminals are the bad ones. Like it's it's and police are different. They're diverse. Military is different. It's diverse. Like things are complicated. The world is complicated. So it's just I think they think that if they have this police state, that it's just going to be picket fences and classic 1950s America, and that somehow they'll keep the minorities from getting to them or something. But they do have this odd worship of military and cops. Like you can even look if you watch those interviews with Tucker Carlson and Kyle Rittenhouse. At one point he's like, oh, the police are the real heroes. It's like, police are the real heroes. Like, aren't they just doing their job like everybody else? Like, how is the grocery, like, there's a ship that brings in food, or a truck that brings food from a farmer who grows it, and I eat it. And the grocery store worker that stocks it. And if I didn't have those people in my life, I would be dead. And those are heroes. Like, those are heroes to me. Like, how are they not heroes? And yet police are the heroes. Now people say, oh, well, it's because being a police officer is a dangerous job. It's actually not. If you look at statistics, the death rate for police officers is incredibly low, except for COVID. They've been dying from COVID. It's the number one killer of police officers by far, because being a cop is actually a fairly safe job. Being a offshore fisherman or a lumberjack or something like that, much, much worse, much more dangerous. Now, this guy, man, you're so dumb. This is because Trump had promised the Taliban that he was going to hand over the country to them. And so he essentially said, like, stop this, like, if the country's going to be like handed over to you, of course you're going to stop killing servicemen. Like, God, you're dumb. You're really, really fucking dumb. Do you ever question yourself? Do you ever sit back and say, like, are the things I believe, like, are they factually correct? What's the other perspective? Why could this happen? Do you think, like, Trump was on the ground, like, stopping it all? Do you think, like, Trump policy was stopping it all? Because it's the same people in place. They're still federal employees. This is all deep state, like deep state. These are the same people in place doing the same job in between terms. Do you think that, like, Trump came into office and everybody's like, what an efficient job, all because of fucking Trump? Nobody's dead. No, it's because he fucking promised the Taliban they could have the country. God, you're so dumb. Oh my God. Like, oh my gosh. Great. Yeah, appeal to authority, do it for a living. Great, I'm sure you do, dude. I'm sure. You know all about it. Dude. Oh my God. But this is what I'm talking about. Like there are a lot of really dangerous jobs out there. And no one sits there and goes, oh, offshore fisherman. What a fucking hero. I mean, he's getting us those fish, and they die at a massive they die at a massive rate. Anyway. Okay. All right, 19K92. Where's your question? Let's see it. I wasn't ignoring it, but I missed stuff, And this is also true. Like, what do you think? You think we were going to win that war? Like, do you think we were going to win in Afghanistan? I mean, come on, guys. Come on. Who believes I can sell you a bridge in Brooklyn, if what has Carmine been asking me about? I don't know. Yeah. This I tend to agree with, that he would have crumbled it. Yeah. but it's hard to say. Probably he probably wouldn't have. He probably would have just switched back and said, "Oh, we're not really pulling out," and we'd be there more years. Um, um, it's tough because like he doesn't have. So this is on whether Biden needs to be pushed more. Like obviously, like constructive criticism and pushing needs to happen with anybody. And one of the sad things about the state of politics in America is that the Democrats need a opposition to question them and keep them in check. You need that. That's the advantage of the two-party system, is that you have two groups that criticize each other and keep them in check. Currently, there's just a completely insane group, and when I say insane, I mean like just bonkers. Like they're claiming that the election didn't happen. That that I mean, what else can you even say? That they want to install like religious judges and establish. I mean, they're literally the Taliban. Like they are. Like you look at the Taliban's views and Republican views, and they're kind of in line, right? Like they really like guns. They're really religious. They don't really like women that much. So we definitely need a party to keep the Democrats in check. But it's tough because if you criticize the Democrats too much and you abandon them too much, then the alternative is so much worse, right? And so it's too bad, So it's like, yeah, we definitely need to push them. But at the same time, how much can he really get past with Joe Manchin? And then how much do you want to like trash them before people become disillusioned and the Republicans win? So it's this horrible balance. And, God, I wish we had a better system, a better party. I wish we had a better opposition party than the Republicans, Oh, but man. This is another thing. This is back to this idiot. Look, dude. Like, do you have is there any logic to this statement? What about lefties claiming voter suppression with the largest voter turnout in history so far? LOL. Okay. Now, the largest voter turnout was the last election, and the voter suppression laws were after the last election. So do you see how you're a fucking idiot? Like, do you get that? Like the last election had, really great turnout. And then voter suppression laws happened right after. Like, do you see how you're really stupid? I mean, am I coming off as condescending, guys? Am I coming off as an asshole? I think, I've heard a lot of really good things with Broken Earth trilogy. I do like that genre as well. Like I like Dying Earth kind of world. I do love it, and that's kind of why I kind of think Ice and Fire is that. Love me some stream, Preston. Yeah, today's stream is going off the rails. Yeah, some people can really piss me off. I'm sorry. Oh, everybody's been talking about the 3-body problem. I need to. Everybody. This is actually like the top of my queue is 3-body problem. Everybody's bringing this up with me as the thing to read. Like, yeah. I mean, I should really like focus on this rather than Wheel of Time, because I know how Wheel of Time is going to end, and So, what you gonna do? Preston, I've read Marx. He's not that different from Adam Smith. They're not that far from each other actually. There's some good ideas in Marx, like like there's certain things that are very true. Like if you're doing a job that's like very repetitive, you don't feel very satisfied. But if you take a job from beginning to end, there's more satisfaction. So the assembly line worker is very, very disillusioned and things like this. Everything, Marx has a lot of great ideas. I'm not a Marxist, but I'm probably like, if you were to like pin down my beliefs, it's like, I believe in like the perpetuation of the capitalist system through redistribution of wealth downward. Because I want to keep motivation, but at the same time, like, I want to keep things fair and not have the super rich gain too much power, which is why I say, like, very clearly, like, what I want is just like Scandinavia. Like those are really good systems, and there's nothing theoretical or abstract about them. They're just systems that work better than ours that we should emulate. And then if we get to that point and we want to talk about getting even better than Scandinavia, like, we can work on that. But maybe in Scandinavia they have discussions about where to go next. But like, but we have a clear world to strive towards, where things are better, that work better in a government sense, and it's Scandinavia. Like, it's very simple. I don't need any any theory out there. And who wants me to bring back more morons to yell at? Okay. So savage. I mean, I could be an asshole. No worries. Like, people piss me off. It's rough, It's like, I go through my life, and when you have friends and you meet people throughout life who have had, say, abortions, and then you run into a group of people that are like, what? I want to make it so that you have to have forced births. Or when you have, gay friends who love people and want to get married to them, and you have somebody else that are like, no, you're an immoral person and you should not be able to marry whoever you want. Like that's pretty horrible. Like, or when, like I said, like at the very beginning of the stream, I was talking about my life in Wisconsin. Like, I spent a lot of time in nature, a lot of time camping, and like I do have a love of nature. And when people say things like, "Oh, climate change isn't real," like, you're like, "Oh God, like you're really horrible. Like, you're a horrible, horrible person," Or when I see people that could have really been helped from like advancements in science, like my father. And people are like, no, you know what? My religious belief that's creepy, based on, this book that says, like, Noah's Ark happened. Like, your father can be in pain, and and people like him can be in pain because I believe Noah's Ark happened. Like, how am I supposed to like feel about that? And it's tough. When he's got these people that like just believe this stuff that's just, and like I say, I do think, like, on a basic level, it's a religious thing. Like, it's people that believe in Noah's Ark and people that don't. I have read Shogun. Shogun is great. It's a fucking great book. Really well paced. This was like, so Shogun was like the beach book of the I think of the late 70s. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it came out in 1975. And what's brilliant, I mean, Shogun is just a really great story. But one of the things I really love about it is that at the beginning of the book, he starts introducing Japanese language. And then the character learns the Japanese language, and you learn it as a reader. So as you go, the book becomes more and more Japanese as the character becomes more and more familiar with Japan. It's a fascinating thing because it takes place during the Japanese isolation period. for those who don't know, that Japan went through a period of isolation from around 1600 to Matthew Perry bringing them out of isolation in the late 19th century. I don't know the exact dates. And so in this period, the only place that foreigners were allowed where some Portuguese could trade at like Nagasaki. But other than that, foreigners were not allowed. The Japanese had a bad experience with Christian missionaries. And so they wanted them out. And so they're just like, no foreigners. And so it's about a sailor who crash lands in Japan during this period. It's really, really, it's really incredible. Yeah. This is the thing. Yeah. So conservative economics. And this is the thing is conservative economics has no basis in any school of thought, in any economic school of thought, which is a funny thing. Like when people say like, oh, we need to cut taxes and that's going to be good for the economy. There is no economic theory that supports that. I mean, in a time of a recession, it would work under a Keynesian or a neo-Keynesian model. And under a neoclassical model, it doesn't work because under rational expectations, one would expect that later on the taxes would be raised again in order to pay for the budget. And so you would make no significant business decisions. Like, why would you invest in starting a business when you know your taxes are going to be raised later in the long term? So the neoclassicist is always thinking about long term. Like really short term stuff doesn't make any sense, and because the rational person understands that the short term is in the short term. So why would I make a long term economics decision based on it? So like these tax cuts for the sake of tax cuts during times of not a recession are not supported by economists. And so it's really like conservatives are really, really dumb when it comes to economics. And they pretend like they know a lot. They pretend that like, oh no, tax cuts are always good. Because the average person doesn't know anything about economics. So like, but what I'm saying is that like, again, from the Keynesian perspective, a tax cut during a recession would make sense. For a neoclassical perspective, a short-term tax cut makes no sense. There probably would be some justification for long-term tax cuts under a neoclassical model, but it's you can't have that really unless you're talking about massive government, unless you're talking about cuts to spending, which no Republican ever does. And this is how you guys want to bring back the idiot. Oh my God. Climate change denier right here. Climate always changes. Yeah, dude. Yeah. No, it's winter. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and ice ages. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Like, what can you do at this point? Like, what can you do? Like, I can talk about the science. Like, I can talk about how, like, we know exactly how much carbon dioxide and how much methane is in the atmosphere because you can dig up caskets, you can dig up coffins that have oxygen trapped inside. We know exactly how much has changed. We know that scientifically how those are greenhouse gases. Like he's just so fucking stupid. Like he's so dumb. How did I end up with him as a fan? Like I don't understand. Like how? And remember, 45 minutes ago, I asked a single good Republican policy, and there was none. Like this is where I am. I think that I am with I would say that there's a very large group of people that feel the way I do. And that is, I understand veganism and I understand that it's morally superior. I get it. I get it from an abuse perspective. I get it from a environmentalist perspective, especially. Okay. I understand that, yes, that meat is detrimental. We can do without it. we can treat animals better if we wanted to. We could go to plant-based diets. We could. Veganism, there's no you can get in an argument with a vegan. A vegan's going to destroy you. Okay, they're going to win. They've got the high ground on everything. Okay, you can't, and they've thought about it. Okay, you're not going to win an argument against a vegan. At the same time, I'm too weak. I'm too weak as a person. Like, I eat meat. I also avoid a lot of other things. I avoid gluten. I avoid soy, which is really hard in Taiwan. I avoid dairy for different medical reasons, but for allergic reactions and such. And so to cut meat from my diet as well would be just so hard. It'd be so hard. Now, in the future, when I've had the Beyond Burgers, that's the one without soy, and if those become cheaper and more readily available and everywhere, if when fake meat comes around, I will happily switch to fake meat when it becomes readily available and everywhere. So it's just like I say, I'm just, and I think there's a lot of people in my camp that I know this is wrong and I'm just weak. It's like knowing you should work out more. Knowing you shouldn't look at as much internet porn. It, you're just too weak. That's how I am with vegetarianism and veganism. I understand I understand that it's right. On S Day, we forget the Scandinavian countries still practice global imperialism, capitalism, play a massive role in sucking the third world drive resources and labor. Love your videos and streams. I agree. I mean, yeah, they do. They do. There's still work to be done. It's also a lot in Norway's perspective to be oh, we're carbon neutral except for our oil, or oh, we can have all these social programs because we have an infinite amount of oil. I get it. But I think there's still a massive amount of things that we can look to Scandinavia for and admire. On just the amount of aid they give as percentage of their GDP. And I don't just mean Scandinavia. I think New Zealand has a lot of things to admire as well. But outlook, how they treat each other. How they treat the unemployed, how they treat prisoners, how they deal with maternity leave and paternity leave, how they respect workers, all these sorts of things. There's so much to learn from them. There's so much that they're doing right, and their systems work so much better. And yes, they still rely on capitalism, which still exploits labor in Vietnam and China and sweatshops and stuff like this, and hopefully in the future we can address these things, and there's ways to go from there. I mean, it's another thing. It's I know buying Nike shoes is morally wrong, but it's where wear burlap sacks on my feet. I understand, but what can we do? Oh my God, back to the moron, dude. No one, not a single reputable economist, follows Austrian school. None. Not a single politician in the world follows Austrian school. Austrian school of economics was proven incorrect, empirically. You can look at these beliefs that they have. There's not a single person. If you believe in Austrian school, you're believing it because of political reasons, not because of math or empirical evidence in the environment. This is a big thing. So with both Keynesian and neoclassical economics and behavioral economics, there are things in the real world that show that these things have truth to them. You can actually make predictions. You can have models that show what results are going to be. Economics is a science. It's a science. You can actually empirically observe things and see those things in the real world. Now, neoclassicism, a lot of people really like it because there's a lot of there's a lot of great math and a lot of great theory. But the neo-Keynesian stuff like empirically happens. Like when there is like shifts to the interest rates, like that does change behavior, even though the neoclassicists believe that it shouldn't. Like it happens. Like that, they've proven little things like menu costs and stuff like that neo-Keynesians like use to happen. People do, rational expectations, people do act rationally, like a lot, like people do act with game theory and behavioral stuff, like psychologically, like we can predict, the way people act. Austrian school doesn't work empirically in the real world. It is completely a political way of thinking. And you believe it because you have a political bias. You have studied no economics, and you will not understand nothing about economics if you believe Austrian school. It is the most idiotic thing. It's like saying, you know what? This gravity thing, I prefer to think it's magic. Like, really, do you have any empirical data to that? Is there any scientist in the world that believes that it's magic? No. Like, it's, oh God. It's like I keep thinking it can't get dumber. Like it couldn't get dumber than climate denial. And then it's like Austrian economics. Austrian school economics. Like, oh my God. Oh my God. LeBron or Jordan? Okay. This is a long question. I'm gonna go on this one. So okay, I'm going to say LeBron, and this is controversial. Like Jordan is really, really, really incredible. Okay, he was, and he's a complete dick. He's a horrible human being. Horrible human being. Well, LeBron is a really fantastic human being. He gives so much to charity. He's such a good person when you see him in interviews. Jordan is just a dick, and he's a bitter dick. And he's still like bitter about like things that happened 30 years ago and 40 years ago. He's such a dick. Jordan, he was really good and he revolutionized the game. And I think the reason he was so successful is that the league didn't know how to deal with him and adjust to his style of play. So his big thing is he was a driving guard, which was not really how basketball was played before. Usually the big scorers was your center, your Wilt Chamberlain or a power forward or something. So you have this driving guard who's all of a sudden this big scoring threat. And the way everybody tried to deal with it was to double team him. And so they double team him and then he would just pass to Scottie Pippen and Scottie Pippen would score. And so they didn't know what to do. And everybody started believing the hype that Jordan's incredible. We have to double team him every time. Well, turns out Jordan's shooting percentage was actually pretty low. He only had like a 50% shooting percentage, but he had good people surrounding him too with rebounds and obviously Pippen there to score when to always pass off to. So Jordan had a lot of great supporting players that he took the credit for. Not that he wasn't insanely good. But I think LeBron is up against people that do know how to play against him. And he's still able to succeed really, really well. Now, of course, he's like physically bigger. Jordan was doing more with what he had. I mean, Jordan's only 6'6". Jordan was my height. And revolutionized the game and things like that. But I'm gonna say LeBron on this one because I think that people don't believe the hype about LeBron as much as they did about Jordan. They weren't scared of Jordan. The refs also the refs cheated for Jordan so much. Jordan was allowed to take 4 steps. Jordan was always given the and a foul when he did a drive. They don't do it as much with LeBron. So I'm going to say LeBron. Very controversial opinion. Everybody's going to be like, what do you know? Science is for nerds. Nerds! This is this big thing about like nerd culture versus geek culture and the crossover. Like geeks are kind of wannabe nerds, which is a kind of funny thing. Like real nerds that really know stuff don't really act like geeks. They don't act like people in the Big Bang Theory. Like people in the Big Bang Theory wouldn't have that much time to care about comic books and stuff. You know, but geeks are kind of geeks admire nerds, which is a weird thing, right? Um, I'm supposed to start Mistborn. People have good things to say about Brandon Sanderson. I haven't read most of their stuff, and people say if you're going to read something, read Mistborn. Um, but I'm very optimistic about the future of sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, it's like anything. You get because it's so popular now, you're going to have an entire generation of people that are super interested in it, and they're going to pursue it and go on and do great things. Um, George R. R. Martin's like protege went on to write the Expanse. You're just going to have more and more of this kind of situation. Like people talk about like comedy, like stand-up comedy. Like the more and more people watch it, the more and more people practice it, the more and more people get good at it, and then you just have so many great stand-up comics. Um, so I think I'm very bullish on the future being bright. Hopefully, I think the thing we have to really root for is having breakthrough like ideas and genres make it into the movie industry because they're only they're only interested in like safe um, bets, So I guess in order, you need a really good book series in order for a really good movie later on. But no, I yeah, it's another thing at the top. Another thing I need to be reading at the top of the list. Uh, 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 Um, who I watched, who I think is a really great YouTube channel is Cosmic Skeptic, and he does mostly nothing but vegan stuff now. But Cosmic Skeptic is he just has a uh, really good head on his shoulders, and he he pretty much breaks everything down. It's hard not to watch his stuff and not be kind of a nihilist afterwards because you're like, oh no, that's you're right. Like that's true. He didn't put an argument there forward. No, you're right. Boom. I'm sure some people have seen he's pretty big channels, but he's good. Um, but I think once you go away from a belief in religion, right, and a belief in souls, which is fundamentally like the belief in souls is why these people are against abortion and stuff. They believe that you know conception happens and God bestows a soul at this moment and things like this, and only people with souls are should be worried about. But once you remove that, you start thinking about um, caring about other people because they're conscious and feel the world around you. Because once you're an atheist and you don't have this belief in souls, you're like, okay, well, what connects me to somebody else? Well, we're both aware of the world, and we have thoughts and emotions and dreams. And then you start thinking, well, then you start running into animals that have very similar um, minds, and you're like, well, how can I really draw the difference between me and a chimp? How can I draw the difference between me and a cow? Um, and so I think it's I think atheism naturally does lead to veganism, um, even though I'm an old man and I'm not a vegan yet. Oh my god! All right, let's see here. Mm-mm-mm. this is a pretty nice compliment here. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I wonder if I bore people, you know, but this is this is a inspirational poster. Jordan missed 100 shots, 100% of the shots he never took. This is life in general, right? One of the there used to be this. This was way back in the early days of YouTube, and there's this one guy who decided to do a new video way back in the infancy, 3-minute video every day for a year, and I totally forgot his name, but one of them, most of his videos were crap, but then like a few of them were super genius. Like over the course of a year, he made like 20 like golden ones, and one of them was about like how it was about experience and failure, and how if you fail at something 3 times, you have 300% more experience than somebody that didn't try at all. And I remember thinking at the time, mathematically, that doesn't stand to reason, but I understand that the theory behind it. 3 times is infinitely more than 0 times, but not 300% more. But theory-wise, yeah, trying and failing is the best way to learn, and trying occasionally you have success. There's some Russell Crowe movie about him playing tennis, and I just remember one line from it, which was you only learn from failure, and I was just like, oh man, that's a really brilliant line. Because he's like raised by his uncle, and only and his uncle never lets him win at tennis. It's called A Good Year. I'm not saying it's a good movie, just saying that line is pretty brilliant. And he's like, why don't you ever let me win? And he says, well, you can only learn from failure. I was like, oh man, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Where are we with? Oops. Oh my. Okay. What do you think happened with I missed something on Brightwater Keep. I think Brightwater Keep will probably be overthrown and taken for Aegon. I mean, I think there's definitely anti-Tyrell sentiment, and so it's going to be another. The people will rebel against Tyrells taking over. So I do think that it's another weak spot for the Tyrells. What did I miss here? Anything? What did I miss? Yeah, that was mine. Okay, that I found. Theon or Tyrion? I don't know. You're talking about a basketball? Theon, definitely. I mean, which character do I like more? Theon, definitely. Who's better at archery? Theon. I mean, besides doing flips, Theon beats Tyrion at everything except for doing flips. Being a dumbass, they're pretty close. They're both kind of getting drunk, making mistakes on who they have sex with. Anyway, we've been going like 3 hours and 40 minutes, so I'm gonna log off here, guys. But thank you all for sticking with me, and I will see you next time. Thanks a bunch.